formally call the meeting to order. This is a joint meeting of the Committee on Academic Excellence in Research and Participation in Success. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to our committee members and other board members who are here, and to our audience here with us and to our web audience. Thank you all for being here with us. Since our last regular meeting on March the 6th, the staff have been analyzing requests for preliminary authority, analyzing requests for new degree programs, and working on merging Chapter 12 rules with Chapter 7. All the board members will remember that our interest in these rules, changing these rules, has to do with our wanting to expedite our internal timelines on, and also to expand our way of looking at accreditors who come into the state of Texas and want to open a school. These rules were posted in the Texas Register, and the public comment period just ended on April 21st, and we will be discussing and voting on these rules later today. Okay, agenda item 2 is consideration of adopting the minutes from several meetings, January 15th, January 23rd, and March 6th. Are there any additions or corrections? I have a slight correction. If I knew where it was, I made it on my computer. You think it's enough if I generally say what it is and they find it and correct it? Or do I need to know exactly? Is that all right, Bill? Okay. It's a question by Mr. Heldenfels. Oh, by the way, hello, Fred. You're with us on the phone?
If you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you really well.
Sounds good.
It's a question by Mr. Heldenfels, and he's asking about alignment with the text for the college readiness standards. And the first time he's quoted it as saying text, T-E-X-T, and then the next, in the rest of the sentence, it gets back to text. But if y'all could just find that and change text, T-E-X-T, to T-E-K-S, please. Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion?
I will make a motion with the non-substantive change.
Second. You never know. I have a motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Reminding members of the AER committee to just vote. Agenda item 3 is to open a public hearing on the Institution for Creation Research Graduate School in Dallas. We invite any members of the public who would like to comment on the request for a certificate of authority from the Institute for Creation Research Graduate School to please make sure you have signed in. As I said before, public comment will be limited to a total of 30 minutes, and we have people up here who will let you know as your time dwindles away. If you come up and sit here with us when you make your comment, tell us your name and your affiliation, if any, and your address. All right. Okay, is Stephen Schaffersman? Welcome.
Thank you. Should I sit here?
Anyone you want.
Thank you. Dr. Paredes, members of the board, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Stephen Schaffersman. I'm president of Texas Citizens for Science. My organization is an advocacy group to defend accurate and reliable science and science education in Texas. I've been active in this since 1980. For the last 27 years, I have worked primarily with the State Board of Education and the legislature. I never thought I would be in this room, but here we are. I respectfully request that you deny the application of the Institute for Creation Research for a certificate of authority. I'm not going to read my long testimony. I just want to summarize a few points. The Institute for Creation Research is not a science or science education institution. In an article, which I do reproduce in my notes, it's the second to last page in my comments, their president, Dr. John Morris, correctly describes what ICR really is. Quote, ICR is well known as a creation science research group with an additional emphasis in biblical apologetics. But first and foremost, ICR is a Christian ministry, unquote. Texas should not be in the business of giving creationist religious ministries a certificate of authority to award master's degrees in science education. Creation science is a pseudoscience based on biblical, not scientific beliefs. The foremost activity of ICR is devising illogical, sophistic arguments to make it appear that their true science, as they call it, supports a biblical worldview, and that legitimate mainstream scientists dishonestly claim otherwise. This grossly misleading and false activity is what ICR teaches its students in order to propagate and perpetuate their pseudoscientific doctrine. This is not science education. The ICR's manipulation of facts is seen in other examples. On the last page of my handout, I want to refer you to their ad. This ad is on the last page of the back cover of their journal Acts and Facts. It began running in November 2007, and the last issue is April this year. The ad is the same. It says, quote, earn the Master's of Science in Education, Master's of Science degree in Science Education with one of 4 new minors in ICR's online distance education program. Now, they gave up their TRACS accreditation in California last year. They don't have accreditation here or a certificate. They can't legitimately advertise an MS degree in science education, but they're doing it. I consider this false advertising. The foremost reason to deny ICR's application, of course, is because their graduate degree program does not meet your published standards, specifically standards 9 and 12. My second page of my handout describes in some detail, and I have much more on the web, about why their program does not meet standards 9 and 12. Okay.
Mr.
The
Shaker,
faculty are not scientists, and
I'm sorry your time is up, but I'd like one clarification. When you're talking about standards 9 and 12, you're talking about our rules?
that's right, section 7.7, standards 9, faculty, standards 12, curriculum,
Right. Okay.
and they do not meet those standards.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
George Ennis?
Good morning.
Hi, Mr. Ennis.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is George Ennis. I have a PhD in mathematics from the University of Texas at Austin and more than 30 years' experience teaching and applying math in the physical and biological sciences. Dr. Paredes aptly identified the Institute for Science Creation program under consideration as one in creation studies. Indeed, the ICR desire to offer a program in science education is curious, given their long-standing and futile efforts to undermine both science and public appreciation of scientific progress. But they have found science tough. Perhaps in science education they seek a softer target. At the foundation of science is the scientific method, and at its base, the hypothesis. Hypotheses are statements about the world, and the scientific method prescribes tests for each hypothesis. Credible hypotheses can fail their tests. Tests teach us about the hypotheses. Hypotheses that have passed many tests are well accepted, but still not facts. Scientific fields have no facts, only hypotheses in various stages of acceptance or rejection. According to ICR bylaws, the Institute is based on a collection of tenets. Tenets, according to Webster's dictionary, are points of view put forth as authoritative without adequate grounds. ICR tenets are not subject to test. For example, one of their bylaws begins, all things in the universe were made and created by God in 6 literal days of the creation week described in Genesis. Can a person accept such tenets and also accept the scientific view that all hypotheses are subject to test, subject to rejection? Can such a person even comprehend what science encompasses? I think the answer is no. However, the ICR Science Education program includes lessons that would refute accepted science based on its failure to accord with ICR tenets. Thus, an inherent conflict abides within this program that would force students to compromise their own science education and, by extension, that of their students. Ladies and gentlemen, many religious groups have sets of tenets and would like nothing more than to label them science and have them taught as such. I urge you to support Dr. Paredes and the public and yourselves by labeling this program for what it is, creation science, creation studies. Thank you.
We need your address and your affiliation if you have one for the record. You didn't state that.
Judy Collins is doing a good job of monitoring our speakers, but I'm worried that they can't see you. Can you kind of come up here and,
You can sit here.
well, y'all just have to use hand signals.
How about that? And I can yell, because I gotta watch the clock over here. You want me to stand up when it's time?
Just stand up when you've got your 2 and then your 1, and come over here where you'll be in view. Thank you. Daniel Gao, did I pronounce that correctly?
That's right. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Daniel Gao, and I had a Bachelor of Sciences and Master of Sciences degrees from Beijing University in China, and also I have a PhD in Geography from the University of Texas at Austin in 2001. I have no personal associations with ICR prior to this morning, but so I speak purely from a scientist or citizen's point of view. I'm involved in a broadcast company. We host a daily talk show on a commercial radio station which covers 150 miles in diameter from Houston. We have an hour-long science evolution discussion presented every week in our program. You know, average Chinese audience are highly educated in Texas, many of them with graduate degrees in the field of sciences. From the broad responses we have been getting, I can assure the committee that there is a great concern about the evolution model as the only model allowed to be presented in our classroom. Parents cannot give their kids, teachers cannot give their students a satisfied answer with a clean conscience. Furthermore, it is especially embarrassing that there is no other credible research going on in Texas when dealing with the forensic science of our past. But whenever there is a guest in our program who presents his or her view based on the research of the Institute for Creation Research, it's always been refreshing and accepted very well by our audience. Because they are not a propaganda academy to promote Christian theology, but being a PhD myself, I can testify that this is a solid scientific research and educational institution. They do clean research, a lot cleaner and more self-critical than their evolutionist counterparts. On a more personal note, I was born and raised an atheist, and naturalistic science was the only choice that I can choose when I was educated back in China. I'm now a naturalized citizen, and this is my first time to speak publicly from my conscience. Therefore, I do believe that we shall welcome their presence in Texas with great enthusiasm. To reject ICR's application will be utterly short-sighted. I hope my children and my children's children can have an option, can have a choice better than I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gao, we need your address also. Larry Neighbors. And Mr. Neighbors, when you finish, we need your address too.
Yes.
I'll be fine.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in these proceedings. My name is Larry Neighbors, native Texan. I hold a degree in secondary education from the University of North Texas in Denton. I'm here to encourage the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board members to approve the Institute for Creation Research's graduate school formal petition for a certificate of authority to teach science degrees in the state of Texas. As you know, ICR has been offering graduate-level science degree courses in the state of California for 26 years. The recent relocation to Dallas requires your approval so they may continue the work of the graduate school in Texas. As you also know, ICR has been very forthright in providing any and all supportive documents requested by the board, have been eager to modify the structure of the graduate school where necessary to meet or exceed the standards of educational excellence the board requires. It is my understanding that a significant majority of the emails, editorials, and other correspondence you have received from the public have been supportive of approval for ICR's request. There have been, however, some opposing viewpoints expressed, and it seems the common thread of these opposing the graduate school is the attempt to marginalize the scientific credentials of the staff at ICR because they hold a Christian worldview. To expose the weakness of this position, allow me to read to you the original purpose statement for Harvard University. Let every student be plainly instructed and earnestly encouraged to consider well the main end of his life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ, which is eternal life, John 17:3, and therefore to lay Christ as the cornerstone, as the only sure foundation of all sound knowledge and learning. Now let me ask you, were the accomplishments of the early Harvard graduates rendered irrelevant because of such an openly Christian educational emphasis? Obviously not. The scientists of the ICR are true scientists, and their graduate school teaches the same experimental science as do other state of Texas approved graduate schools. To approve their request encourages academic diversity in Texas. To deny their request would send the opposite message, one of academic suppression. It is my hope you will not only encourage the ICR graduate school, but that you will offer them a hearty Texas-sized welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neighbors. Sandra West.
Thank you. I'm Sandra West from Canyon Lake. I have a BS in general science, MS in marine biology, and a PhD in science education. I represent the Science Teachers Association of Texas, which is made up of over 6,000 science teachers. You are now receiving a copy of the STAT position statement on evolution that is consistent with statements from both the Science Education and Science Associations, such as the National Science Teachers Association, the National Biology Teachers Association, the National Academy of Sciences, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. All provide abundant evidence that support evolution as a powerful scientific theory. ID, or creationism, has consistently been rejected by scientists because it fails to provide a coherent and evidence-supported view of nature and the history of the natural world, and ID was rejected in the Dover ruling. The only question science has about evolution is how evolution occurs, not whether evolution occurs. The coordinating board has a responsibility to protect our academic standards by requiring rigorous criteria. Although two teams of non-science and non-science educators provided initial positive recommendations, hundreds of scientists and science educators have opposed the ICR master's degree as currently described. Further, numerous detailed reviews by scientists and science educators, including myself, report that the ICR program is piecemeal and shallow, and therefore inadequate graduate level preparation in science education. The proposal does not meet two standards from the coordinating board criteria, as previously mentioned, standards 9 and 12, faculty quality or program quality. The faculty would not meet university hiring criteria with their lack of peer-reviewed publications. The ICR courses are outmoded, and inapplicable undergrad level textbooks don't resemble any offered for graduate credit by other Texas universities in breadth, depth, or content. They would not be acceptable for transfer. The program would not adequately prepare students in science education, particularly at the graduate level. The program would be accurately named as a master's degree in creationism or creation studies. If it's not science, it can't be science education. As one of their instructors reveals in their syllabus, quote, "Any discussion about origins is a spiritual battle. I respectfully request that you reject ICR's application." Thank you. Did I
Thank
give
you,
you enough
Ms.
for the, my address? Canyon Lake?
You might have, yeah, we need you to. Your address. Dr. Jim Westgate.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Jim Westgate. I have graduate degrees in biology and geology, almost 40 years experience in science education, and almost 30 years experience at the higher education level, and over 100 publications in science. I'm from Beaumont, Texas. I'm an earth and space science professor, and I'm representing the Texas Academy of Science. And on my handout, you have a list of the board members of the Academy. There are several academies in Texas that are confused with us. We've been advocates of science in Texas since 1892. We're one of the longest standing science advocacy groups and have almost 1,000 members. And if you look at our board, you can see we are represented on institutions of higher learning, government agencies, and industry across Texas. The statement of the board here is summarized. You have been given a copy of this earlier, but basically this is our stand against including creationism and intelligent design in science curricula in Texas. And that's because science isn't defined by the subject, but how the subject is approached. And it's well documented that the United States Supreme Court has shown that creationism is not science, it's religion. And we don't have a problem with ICR offering religion courses, but they shouldn't be called science education degrees. They're not science because they don't use science methodology. Personally, I'm a vertebrate paleontologist, so I do most of my research in physical sciences and geology and look at the curriculum. It's a very narrow geology curriculum, although the website claims it's broad-based. If you look at what teachers teach in earth sciences in Texas, we teach geology, meteorology, oceanography. There's no atmospheric science involved in the program. There's no marine science involved in the program. There's no economic geology in the program. And it's because I'm a paleontologist, I'm very interested in historical geology. The courses are all focused on historical geology, but that's a very narrow range of the field of geology. So it's not broad-based, and that's not what science teachers in Texas need. So the Texas Academy of Science requests you deny the request of the ICR.
Thank you. Cheryl, where's Cheryl? You gave me the thing that came by fax. And at what point am I supposed to give that out? Does anybody know? I'll just do it at the end. Okay. Dr. Richard Neville. There you are.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good morning, Dr. Phillips, members of the board. My name is Richard Neville. I hold a doctorate in geology, and for 30 years I did laboratory research on the conversion of energy with Exxon Research and Engineering in Baytown, Texas. I'm proud to call myself a scientist. Since I retired 13 years ago, I've devoted my life to studying the scientific method and what science is, and believe it or not, I'm also a student of religion. Consequently, I recognize religion trying to masquerade as science. Please do not certify the Institute for Creation Research to grant a master's degree in science education. Why? Here are some headlines that you'll read in the paper almost every week. Food shortages, water shortages, energy shortages, shortage of technically trained employees, overpopulation, global warming, pollution, environmental destruction, new diseases, declining lifespans. That was just in the paper the other day. Overconsumption of resources. Should I go on? I mean, you are familiar with these, I'm sure.
The only ones who can solve these problems are scientists and rational people who recognize the realities of our natural world. I looked at all of your resumes, and I'm aware that you are all intelligent people. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. Surely you must recognize that teaching science to our children will be critical to humanity's survival. We must develop students interested in scientific careers, and we must improve the scientific literacy of all Americans. By its own words, the ICR is antagonistic towards science. If you allow it to call its graduates science teachers, you will do a major disservice to yourselves, to your country, to Texas, and humanity in general. Please, I'm pleading with you. I am literally pleading with you. Do not grant ICR its certification. Religion has its place, but it is not in the science classroom. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Paul Murray.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Paul Murray. I live here in Austin, Texas. I'm a member of Texas Citizens for Science. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Geological Sciences, a Master's in Geophysical Engineering, and I work as a professional geophysicist. I have done so here in Austin for the last 8 years. I'm a member of the Texas Board. I'm licensed by the Texas Board of Professional Geoscientists as well. I'm here this morning because not only am I a working scientist, but I am a student of the history of science, and I think there's an important lesson here if we take a look at the history of science that is directly relevant to the issue that is before you here today. If you were, say, an anatomist about 500 years ago, and you were studying anatomy, and you dissected a body and you found something you didn't understand, you would consult the ancient texts of Thales, because at the time, the way science worked was simply the preservation of what we called the wisdom of the ancients. If what you found disagreed with the ancient text, then clearly you were wrong or you had made an error. In the 1600s, people like Galileo, Nicolas Steno, Descartes, Isaac Newton came up with a new philosophy that they advocated, one which said, rather than start with a conclusion, let's start with what we observe. This was the foundations of modern science. We take what we observe about the modern world, about the world around us. We observe this data. We come up with an idea as to how these things fit together, and only then do we come to a conclusion. This is the basis of the modern scientific method, and it's served us well for the last 400 years. I think you would all agree. If you look at the ICR's website, in their information to prospective students, they openly and plainly state that they believe in the accuracy of the Bible, another ancient text, as literally true on all matters historical and scientific. That is a direct quote. This takes us backwards 400 years. Rather than starting with the observations, they start with the conclusion and expect you to work backwards. They look for specific points of data in what they call their science education curriculum and ignore the vast majority of geology, physics, chemistry, biology for the last 400 years. What they are calling science education has as much to do with science as reality television has to do with reality. I strongly urge you to consider denying their application for the Certificate of Authority. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chris Kroschel. How badly did I do on that?
That's fine. Kroschel.
Kroschel.
As you said, my name is Chris Kroschel. Hello, Chairman, board members. I am graduate of the United States Air Force Academy with an astronautical engineering degree. I am also a former captain of the United States Air Force, former F-16 instructor pilot, and former flight commander. As such, I see the space program as the epitome of scientific and academic achievement in our world today, really. I would like to tell about something in the Apollo 8 mission of that space program. Then Colonel Frank Borman, the commander of that mission, gave one message back to Earth during the mission. This is the message. Colonel Frank Borman himself was on the leading edge of scientific and academic achievement at that moment, of all of man's scientific and academic achievement. This was his message, and as a flight commander myself, I think it's significant that he sees creation as the foundation of that scientific and academic achievement. I would like to give my support for ICR's request for Certificate of Authority.
Thank you. Curtis Brown. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. My name is Curtis Brown. I graduated from the University of Texas Law School in 1976 after studying at other universities, including through the Deutscher Akademischer Austauschdienst at Oxford University. I practiced tax law mainly for over 30 years. I have served as adjunct professor of law at Baylor University. I've lectured on tax matters at SMU Law School and 2 Texas public law schools. I've served on the Judiciary Committee of the Dallas Bar Association and chaired the Estates and Trust section of the Dallas Bar Association. I have never met any of the scientists or science professors with ICR's graduate school. I am familiar with their reputation for the highest level of integrity and academic excellence. From my perspective as an educator, I cannot imagine that this board could consider in its decision for ICR's application that it teaches that the earth was created by God, a belief still accepted by scores of millions of Americans, including myself. As a tax attorney, I would encourage the board to consider as one factor in its decision on ICR's application the cost to the state of Texas of tax dollars if the board denies the application and ICR appeals the decision, including to the state Supreme Court, and also to consider the likelihood that the Texas Supreme Court will hold in favor of the ICR graduate school and against this board, and especially in light of its decision last year in HEB Ministries versus this board. Thank you.
Thank you.
She's giving you the cutoff over there.
That's all the speakers. Okay. Cheryl, do you have the one that came? Have we received others by fax? I'm just curious why this one is coming to us. And
She didn't want to make a public comment, but just wanted to have this out.
okay. All right. We've received numerous other comments, so I don't think I'm going to read any names into the record. Is that okay, Mr. Franz? I don't need to read this name to the record, do I?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item 4 are items for tomorrow's board agenda related to the Academic Excellence and Research Committee. 4A is the consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to a request from the Institute for Creation Research, Dallas, for a Certificate of Authority. Raymond, will you explain to us this request and give us your recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read my recommendation to the board. The Institute for Creation Research Graduate School first contacted coordinating board staff in July 2005 to gather information regarding the application process for a certificate of authority to offer degree programs. 2 years later, ICR formally submitted a request for a certificate of authority to offer an online Master of Science degree in science education. CB staff soon thereafter began the review process, which typically includes the following: preliminary staff evaluation of the proposal, a site visit to the applying institution by CB staff, coordinating board staff, and subject matter experts, preparation of a draft assessment of the proposed program, responses to draft assessment by the proposing institution, review of both the staff assessment and the institution response by the Certification Advisory Council, and preparation of a final recommendation on approval by CB staff based on the preceding steps. The CAC, the Certification Advisory Council recommendation, then comes to me. I have three options. I can accept a recommendation and carry it to the coordinating board for formal action. I can reject a recommendation and make another to the board, or I can send it back to the staff for further review. It is not unprecedented for me to exercise either option 2 or 3. Indeed, in the last several weeks, I rejected a staff recommendation on a doctoral program proposal. I first learned of the ICR proposal after the Certification Advisory Council had voted to support the staff recommendation that the ICR proposal be approved. It was clear to me immediately that the review process had been flawed. The site visit team had included no experts in science education. One such expert had canceled our participation at the last minute, and a decision was made to proceed with the site visit anyway. Furthermore, the site visit team members were instructed to focus on questions of process and infrastructure and to disregard the academic focus of the proposed program. In its review, the CAC followed a similar tack and recommended provisional approval of the proposed program pending the correction of certain problems related to such issues as institutional governance and library resources. It seemed clear to me upon reading the various evaluation documents that the central issue of whether the proposed program met appropriate standards of science education had been insufficiently addressed. As a result, I directed staff to conduct a fresh review. I believe that the second stage review was thorough and balanced. On January 7, 2008, we brought in a group of 9 scientists and science educators to review the ICR proposal. They examined proposed admission standards, course prerequisites for the proposed program, syllabi and textbooks for the proposed ICR courses, and a mission statement of ICR. On January 10, 2008, we met with representatives of ICR to address questions raised earlier by the group of scientists and science educators. Shortly after the January 10th meeting, ICR representatives requested until March 26th to submit responses to the questions raised, and also asked that the request for a certificate of authority be deferred until the April 24th coordinating board meeting. ICR submitted an updated file for review by the requested deadline. Coordinating board staff in turn reconvened a group of science educators on April 7th to review the new materials. I have now received a staff recommendation with which I concur. I recommend to members of the coordinating board that the proposal by the Institution for Creation Research Graduate School to receive a certificate of authority to offer Master of Science program in science education not be approved. My recommendation to the board is based on 2 considerations, the first of which is that ICR failed to demonstrate that the proposed program meets acceptable standards of science and science education. As indicated in the faculty job announcement, ICR requires that applicants, quote, be committed to young earth creation science and the Bible, unquote. In its current general catalog, ICR states that its mission, quote, is to study, teach, and communicate the works of God's creation, unquote. Also in the catalog appears this statement, quote, "All things in the universe were created and made by God in the 6 literal days of the creation week described in Genesis and confirmed in Exodus. The creation record is factual, historical, and perspicuous. Thus all theories of origin and development that involve evolution in any form are false," unquote. ICR's catalog also states, quote, "The phenomenon of biological life did not develop by natural processes from inanimate systems, but was specifically and supernaturally created by the Creator," unquote. This statement runs counter to the conventions of science, which hold that claims of supernatural intervention are not testable and therefore outside the realm of science. A primary educational goal of Texas and the country as a whole is to increase significantly the number of high school graduates who have mastered basic science and are prepared to pursue careers in science in our colleges and universities. The submitted ICR documents simply do not provide persuasive evidence that the proposed program will move us toward this goal. In thousands, not billions, of text used in ICR courses and submitted by RCR for review, the author, Don DeYoung, writes, quote, "One's principle agreed on is that the earth is young, on the order of 6,000 years old. This is not a working hypothesis to be tested as to whether it is true or false. Instead, it is a basic conclusion drawn from the biblical record of creation as written by the only one who is present, God himself," unquote. At another point, DeYoung writes, quote, "It is clear that the one who created all things can alter physical constants and laws at his will. In fact, most biblical miracles require a temporary suspension of basic natural laws. Whatever the ultimate merit of such views, they clearly stand at odds with the most basic tenets of scientific work, such as observation, testing, and analysis." Furthermore, the proposed ICR program is inconsistent not only with the conventions of science, but with coordinating board rules. For example, Standard 12, Chapter 7 of Board Rules requires that proposed programs, quote, "shall adequately cover the breadth of knowledge of the discipline taught," unquote, and that, quote, "degree level, degree designation, and the designation of the major course of study should be appropriate to the curriculum offered," unquote. As our consultants on science education emphasized, the proposed ICR program, in insisting on a literal interpretation of biblical creation, gives insufficient coverage to conventional science and does not, quote, "adequately prepare students in the field of science education," unquote. Program reviewers also noted the inherent difficulty of providing adequate training and experimentation and laboratory work, hallmarks of effective science education, through an online program. Thus, the proposed ICR program meets neither standard cited above. The key point here is this: the proposed Master of Science and Science Education program inadequately covers key areas of science and their methodologies and rejects one of the foundational theories of modern science. Hence, the program cannot be properly designated either science or science education. In recommending against approval of the ICR program, I am not questioning the validity of religious belief as a means of comprehending the world and universe around us. As far as I know, science has no answer to the question of how life on Earth began or how the Big Bang was initiated some 14 billion years ago. Believers of many faiths might well attribute both these astonishing events to the intervention of a great creator. It is entirely possible that science may never answer these fundamental questions, and that in these and other instances, religious belief supersedes science. But religious belief is not science. Science and religious belief are surely reconcilable, but they are not the same thing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did you have any other staff members you want to speak?
Well, if you have any questions about the processes of the review in more detail, that was a broad overview of the process and the findings that we made based on consulting with both science and science educators, as well as listening to ICR representatives make their case and
the documentation they provided, so Joe Stafford can give you more detail if you have questions, and both he and I can try to answer any questions you might have.
Before we start our discussion, could we have this rule referred to read?
The standard 12?
Yes.
Certainly. This is from Chapter 7. It is one of the several standards. It is Standard 12 entitled Curriculum, and it's in 3 parts, A, B, C, and D. Part A, the quality, content, and sequence of each course, curriculum, or program of study, training, or study shall be appropriate to the purpose of the institution and shall be such that the institution may reasonably and adequately achieve the stated objectives of the course or program, period. Each program shall adequately cover the breadth of knowledge of the discipline taught, and coursework must build on the knowledge of previous courses to increase the rigor of instruction and the learning of students in the discipline. Substantially all of the courses in the area of specialization required for each degree program shall be offered in organized classes by the institution. An institution may offer no more than a very limited amount of for-credit coursework that does not directly relate to the approved programs. And item B, an academic associate degree must consist of at least 60 semester credit hours or 90 quarter credit hours and not more than 66 credit hours or 99 quarter credit hours. A baccalaureate degree must consist of at least 120 credit hours or 180 quarter credit hours and not more than 139 hours or 208 quarter credit hours. A master's degree must consist of at least 30 semester credit hours or 45 quarter credit hours and not more than 36 semester credit hours or 54 credit hours at graduate level past the baccalaureate degree. C, courses designed to correct deficiencies, remedial courses for associate and baccalaureate programs, and leveling courses for graduate programs shall not count towards requirements for completion of the degree. And D, the degree level, degree designation, and the designation of the major course of study shall be appropriate to the curriculum offered and shall be accurately listed on the student's diploma and transcript.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any staff members or professors from the Institute that would like to speak at this time? Please come up if you would.
Commissioner and Madam Chairman, thank you. I'm wondering, given the conclusion that you've arrived at, Mr. Commissioner, whether you want to hear from us or not.
Could you just tell us your name? And
I beg your pardon. I'm Henry Morris. I'm the CEO of the Institute for Creation Research. We are prepared to respond to questions that you may have regarding our progress report, which was our understanding for this meeting. Speaking briefly with Mr. Stafford earlier, he indicated he had looked through the material. I'm assuming, Mr. Commissioner, your staff has done so as well. Your conclusion is obvious. Is it the board's request that we provide additional information, or is it unnecessary for us to do more than just follow through with the...
Well, we have the commissioner's recommendation, but we haven't voted yet, so I'll ask the members if you have any questions for Dr. Morris. I have one question. What did you grant a Master of Science Education degree in California?
Yes, we did. We had, at that time, a more robust program, and we granted degrees in geology and in biology and in astrogeophysics. We have combined those now into a science education degree with proficiencies in those former degree programs. So we are no longer granting degrees in geology or in biology, but rather a degree in science education with minors available within those disciplines.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Kim,
discussion?
Under the circumstances that we probably are going to follow due process beyond this, would it be proper for the committee to hear from our special counsel on those issues?
I think so.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chairman, one of the concerns that we have is...
Could you tell us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. James Jas Johnson. I am special counsel for ICR's Graduate School in this application. And in looking at the statutes that govern these proceedings and in the regulations that were promulgated in order to implement those statutes, and in looking at the First Amendment, and in particular the free speech clause of the First Amendment, which includes academic freedom, which itself includes institutional academic freedom, my concern is that the board needs to be very careful when making this decision, that their decision is not a matter of do we agree with creation science as opposed to evolutionary science or not, because that is not the issue that is before the board. The board's decision is much more specific than that, and it has limitations that are provided by the laws of the land. The laws of the land indicate that free speech is the starting point, and to grant an academic degree is a form of free speech. It's a form of opinion by an institution that a particular individual has studied a particular course of study, and in the opinion of those experts who have provided that education, the student is worthy of a certain recognition. That is an expression of opinion. Generally speaking, expressing opinions on any topic, in fact, words almost exactly like that appear in the Texas Constitution, are fair game in America. If you've seen the Expelled movie, you may remember some of the footage of the Berlin Wall. But here in America, we're supposed to have free speech. There is a limitation on free speech that is of particular relevance to this board, and that is if free speech is used in a way that is deceptive or misleading. And that becomes of relevance in the academic world in general. In particular, the regs that this board is governed by are concerned about degree mills and academic rigor. If some institution is providing a kindergarten education and granting a master's degree for it, that should not be permitted. And the First Amendment is not there to facilitate that. If someone is issuing a diploma in exchange for a check, that's a degree mill, and that should not be permitted in Texas. But ICR's Graduate School, as you have seen from the progress report, is neither of those two and nothing close to it. The scientists here today represent the three main disciplines that are in the minor programs, and all three of them are available to answer any of the science-oriented questions that you may have. If you have any concerns about the academic rigor of the biology department, Dr. Dan Criswell can answer your questions. If you have any questions about the academic rigor of the geology program, the geology department courses, Dr. Steve Austin is here to answer your questions. And regarding physics, Dr. Larry Vardaman is here to answer questions. In fact, one of our faculty jointly received a Nobel Prize for his work in physics. If that's not science, my mind boggles to find what is real science. Real science is based on observation. Our science teachers are trained and technically sophisticated at observing the natural world and taking that data and quantifying it, and then using critical thinking skills to discover and to analyze and to master to the point of stating the predictability of those natural phenomenon patterns in nature, whether in the physical universe or in the world of life science. Critical thinking skills are especially important in any kind of a master's program.
Mr. Johnson, I'm going to give you one more minute.
Okay. Critical thinking skills are particularly important in a master's program. If you are not allowed to critique the majority view of how scientific data is interpreted at the master's program, when would you be allowed to critique it? The main concern that I have from a constitutional perspective is that the decision needs to avoid being viewpoint discriminatory. And I would leave you with that. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Do I have any discussion from members?
Madam Chair, this question may need to be directed to Joe, but in looking at our rules, why don't you share with the committee and the board members, Joe, if any program like this in any discipline was brought before us, would it be treated in exactly the same manner?
Surely. As we just heard, there are limitations on free speech, that there are requirements to accurately label and designate any product or service in this case, and what this Rule 12 is about is that accurate labeling. It is the designation of the degree and the delivery of the services that would be expected with that kind of a label. Let me reread that first part of the rule on curriculum. The quality, content, and sequence of each course, curriculum, or program of instruction, training, or study shall be appropriate to the purpose of the institution and shall be such that the institution may reasonably and adequately achieve the stated objectives of the course or program. If this were a program in accounting, it would be an expectation then that when a student successfully completed all of the requirements for the program, they would be qualified to be an accountant. In the United States, that would mean that they would know enough about the United States tax law that they could guide a person to do proper accounting, etc. If there were a degree in medicine, that we would be safe going to them to be treated for disease. It is that kind of requirement that is set forth in this rule, that the curriculum achieve the objectives as set forth. In this case, and the catalog is fairly clear on it, and I can find it if you would like me to, it is to prepare middle school and secondary science educators, science teachers. So the issue then is, does this reasonably prepare the graduates of such a program to be middle school or high school science teachers? In the same way that you might ask that question about medicine or accounting or nursing or any other engineering, any other field. And I suppose I should be picking your fields, but I'm not sure I know what all of them are. So use your own experience there. Commissioner?
Madam Chair, I want to respond to Mr. Johnson's points. We did everything that I believe is reasonable to ensure that the evaluation of the proposed program was fair and balanced. We brought in science educators from across the state. I can tell you that I read all the material that was submitted to me by ICR personally. I can say that I had no prior views about this matter at all. certainly don't consider myself an expert in science or science education, and so I feel that I had an open mind about this issue. And it ultimately came down to the points that I made in my presentation, and Joe has just underscored. It's a question of properly designating the material. There's absolutely no question about the fact that the Institution for Creation Research has a point of view that should be expressed. There's no question about academic freedom. There's no question about whether the faculty and the students at this institution have the right to proclaim their beliefs and their views. The question is, once again, whether this is properly science. And what we heard from science educators and the literature is that this doesn't meet our standards in terms of coverage of a discipline as it's conventionally defined by experts in the field. And that was ultimately the basis of our judgment. It wasn't a matter of whether we personally or collectively believed in the position of the institution.
Hello. So, Bob, real quick, Mr. Chairman, your question regarding the process was about, regardless of the academic focus of a particular program, it is taken through the same process and evaluated on the same rules. Was that the question, really?
Yes, that is the question.
Did I understand the answer is yes?
The answer is yes, and this particular rule was one that would be conclusive in this case.
And it's actually for Joe also. When you spoke about K-12 education, when we approve a program for educators to teach in public schools in universities throughout the state, do we always have a consistency with TEA and TEX and the standards that are required in teaching of that subject matter? For example, if it was about English, would it have to align with English text? And if it was something that did not align, is that a consideration?
Mr. Rader, there really are two separate questions there. One is the designation of the degree, and there is a separate question about certification for a public school teacher. Those are separate issues, and this particular standard addresses only the degree.
Okay. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, I'm Dr. Larry Vardaman, and I'm the chairman of the Astrogeophysics Department at ICR. I'm also the director of research. I'd like to address the definition of science. And you need to understand, we do have a minority view as to what science is. We support the definition of science that says that it's exploration of the natural world and life sciences. We use exactly the same techniques that conventional science does. The problem is that science has been redefined today from the way it was originally formulated by the founders, Isaac Newton, Johann Kepler, all the standard scientists. Those were Christians, and they defined science for us originally in the procedures. We use the same procedures. The problem is that there is an assumption built in today that was not built in originally, and it has to do with the creator or what is behind science today. The way in which science is applied today is that it's a naturalistic science. In a practical sense, the assumption is there is no creator, there is no God. Now, it doesn't mean that all scientists are not believers or Christians. It just means in the application of their science, they assume there is no creator, there is no God. So it's all naturalistic science. We, instead of that approach, assume that there is a creator God and that the evidence of that creation is built into his creation. So that's a different definition than the conventional scientific community uses. That's why many of the advisors to Dr. Paradis have the viewpoint that they have. They have that basic definition of science being a naturalistic science. Therefore, he's going to get advice opposed to our particular position. I might also say that the way in which we go about doing science is exactly the way the conventional scientific community is. We use the majority of our texts in our courses are conventional scientific texts. Our students learn probably more about evolutionary and old earth science than a conventional science student does in the conventional schools. We have to do that in order for them to understand the issues that they're dealing with. We go beyond that and then do the science and encourage our students to interpret it, assuming that there is a creator God involved. So that is basically the issue that we're addressing here or facing.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay, I invite any discussion from committee members.
Madam Chair, I'd ask Joe to I'd ask you to give us an overview of the process. I know several of us, I think all of us have been given copies of the scope of work which was done in evaluating this, and so I'm not asking you to walk us through, but just from the standpoint of, it's my understanding that y'all went through almost course by course syllabi, drilled down to look at specifically how did those relate back to our general rules. And maybe that's been said, but I just think it's important for the record that you try to give an overview of that, because there's a lot of information that we read. And again, not asking you to go through that whole document, but just give a brief overview of that to make sure that we're all in agreement with that. I'm struggling on how to do that and keep it brief, but let me attempt to do it this way. Let me go back again to the rule that the quality content sequence, the program should be adequately cover the breadth of knowledge in the discipline taught. Now, to look at syllabi and determine whether there is adequate breadth of material taught is largely a question of looking for what is not taught. And again, if I may use the analogy of accounting and failing to ever discuss the tax law, or medicine and failure to discuss current research on cancer, that would be an inadequate breadth of coverage. So what the question then becomes is what is not taught. There are two issues at that point that need to be looked at. One is the extent to which these are graduate courses and build on undergraduate courses with appropriate prerequisites. That's a case really where, as a non-scientist, I have to call on scientists, and the panel of scientists that we had 9 in the first round, we had 4 in the second round, identified several textbooks that they said were commonly used as undergraduate textbooks. That in itself raises questions. I don't think it's truly definitive. What is more striking are the basic tenets and foundational principles that appear on pages 52 and 53 of the ICR Graduate School Catalog. The core idea of science is that any hypothesis is out there to be challenged by observation. And the development of scientific theory comes from creation of a theory of how natural phenomena work and then testing it through observation. If you cannot have that theory and cannot test it, then you don't have science. Now, given that sort of core concept of what science is understood to be, what science educators are expected to teach to middle school and high school students, allow me to read 2 or 3 quotes from pages 52 and 53 of their material, and then ask the question of, is there a gap in the knowledge base, in the breadth of coverage? Quote, "The phenomena of biological life did not develop by natural processes from inanimate systems, but was specially and supernaturally created by the Creator. What theories are untestable under that principle that's one of the starting points?" Quote, "The first human beings did not evolve from an animal ancestry, but were specially created in fully human form from the start, period. Furthermore, the spiritual nature of man, parentheses, self-image, moral consciousness, abstract reasoning, language, will, religious nature, etc., close parentheses, is itself a supernaturally created entity, distinct from mere biological life. What hypotheses are off limits as a result of that founding principle?" And there are several more like that. The point that I would make with those is that sets forth a set of limitations on what can be tested. It eliminates from testing a wide range of the scientific theories that would be a part of middle school and secondary education. And then we come back to the breadth of knowledge for the curriculum as it's labeled.
So basically, the staff and the panel of experts took the curriculum, looked at the course titles, and then matched that against to what was actually being taught?
Not just the course titles and the course syllabi, but also these foundational principles which restrict what can be in those courses. These foundational principles, and I think the word tenets is used elsewhere, but it's foundational principles on pages 52 and 53, at least as I read them, set forth the limitations on what can be covered in the curriculum. That limits the breadth of the curriculum.
Hello. Hello. I'm Dr. Nason, and I'm the Science Education Chair. And I'd just like to address some of these things. First of all, our students are Christian school teachers, and they're from across the country and even around the world. So we are not granting certifications to teachers. We feel that there is a gap there that needs to be filled. I think it's very interesting. I just sent around, at the beginning of this, we sent around an analysis of the benchmarks. The benchmarks from AAAS show what science is and what you should be teaching. You will notice that of the 295 total benchmarks, there were only 20 that did not fit both the creationist and the evolutionary perspective. And of those 20, we teach 19 in our courses. And there are also several of those benchmarks that we support and that are in our defense. It might be surprising to some people to think, oh, they're not science teachers or scientists because they don't agree with the benchmarks. You will also notice in our progress report that we had a comparison of the domains and what we teach. Presumably, the domains come from, and if you don't understand the domains, they're what teachers have to know in order to pass the Texas certification exam. And teachers have to know those particular things and be taught those particular things in their college courses. And supposedly, I would think that those domains would cover the text, which in turn would reflect the National Science Education Standards. And therefore, I would refer you to those domains and see that we are teaching these domains in most of our courses. One thing about both the domains and the benchmarks, many of them have nothing to do with evolution, creation, debate. And that might surprise some of you. Science does not equal evolution. Science does not equal creation. Science is the teaching of observable facts. And in reality, both evolution and creation do not necessarily rely on observable facts. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the rigor of our program. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eddie Miller. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School. Joe, I appreciated your analysis of the contents of our catalog. I just want to make one distinction. We have certain presuppositions that we rely on as not necessarily as hypotheses to test, in pretty much the same way that traditional science relies on certain presuppositions. For example, naturalistic science relies on three things that where there are three basic processes. Number one is the reliability of human reasoning and perception and articulation of what is seen. I'm a behavioral scientist by background, and so when you read the behavioral science literature and you study the research that's being done in perception, for example, you realize that what we see is not automatically translated from what's out there into our brains. What's in our brains operates on what we see. And so there is, when you think about the presupposition of the objectivity of perception, then you are faced with some other issues associated with that. So I want to draw this distinction that, in fact, we have certain presuppositions that we rely on that are not testable hypotheses, just as conventional science does as well. We do test hypotheses in a very similar way, if not identical way, to the way that traditional science tests hypotheses. Thank you.
I want to emphasize again that our scientists and our science educators look carefully at the arguments that have just been articulated. It wasn't a question of whether certain issues were covered. It's clear that the proposed program covers most of the standards or most of the areas of science that are taught in schools. The question is whether the issues were covered with sufficient breadth and with due consideration for the conventions of science and the way science is typically taught in schools and in colleges and universities. And I looked very closely at the arguments that have just been made by representatives of ICR. And the view of our consultants was that the claims simply weren't justified by looking at the syllabi, looking at course objectives, and looking at the structure of the overall program. The view of the science and scientists and science educators was that, yes, it is quite true that in most cases the proposed program does follow typical principles of scientific inquiry and looks at data and conducts observation, unless those issues that are to be investigated conflict with the foundational principles of the institution. And that places a very significant restriction on the understanding of science very broadly, that our consultants argued limited the ability of the people that would come out of this program to teach science as it's conventionally understood in that particular field of inquiry. It's not a question of whether some material is presented. The question is how it's presented and whether it's presented in a way that will encourage students to understand science as broadly as possible and in a way in which science is presented in colleges, universities, and K-12 settings. I would also point out that when I took a look at the ICR program, I looked at the science standards that this board recently adopted, and I felt very strongly upon reading our own science standards that this program would not prepare science teachers adequately to engage those standards.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments?
If I may add one, just for the record, again, I want to quote the rule, and then I want to quote from the catalog. It says, shall be appropriate to the purpose of the institution, and shall be such that the institution may reasonably and adequately achieve the stated objectives of the course or program. Now let me read from page 9 of the catalog. The purpose of the ICRGS is, 1, to prepare science teachers and other individuals to understand the universe within the integrating framework of a biblical perspective using proven scientific data, and 2, to prepare students for leadership in science education. That's the judgment call that's before us.
Dr. Morris?
Madam Chairman.
Welcome back.
Yes, may I ask 2 questions for clarification on our perspective? From hearing your summary, Dr. Paradis, I appreciate that very much. Is it the view of the board that should we be able to produce a graduate that would teach the naturalistic perspective, that would, in essence, meet the qualifications that you're evaluating? Maybe I'll reverse the question. Since we teach both sides of the equation and admittedly have a presuppositional bias toward the creationist worldview, we think we prepare our students to understand both sides of the equation, admittedly favoring the creationist perspective. And it is that I understand that you're disagreeing with, that we producing a graduate that is favored toward or biased toward the creationist worldview as opposed to a naturalistic worldview. Am I understanding you correctly on that?
Well, let me respond. First of all, I don't speak for the board.
Yes, sir. I do understand that, but
I would answer the question this way. Before I would make that judgment, if there were to be a resubmission of material, I would once again refer to science experts and science educators. I think we have to defer to the expertise in the field.
Thank you. And we have no delusion that the majority of science educators today are naturalistic in their perspective, and we represent a minority. We understand that completely. I just was trying to understand how your ruling weighed that, in that since we do represent a minority view, you believe that that should not be granted educational authority. That is, that minority.
I've never said that.
I'm sorry.
The question before the question that I addressed in my recommendation to the board was whether this program could be properly designated as science or science education. You asked a different question.
Yes, sir. And since, again, I'm asking the question because I thought I heard you say that the experts that you consulted said that science education must produce or must teach that which is in agreement with the majority of science educators.
I didn't say that, I didn't say that either, sir.
Okay, well then, if that's not the case, is it not plausible that there would be schools that would teach an alternative, given both sides of the equation, both are unprovable, both are really untestable? Would it not be plausible for a school to exist that favored the minority view as opposed to the majority view?
I would, before I could make a judgment about whether that was plausible, is I'd have to see an actual proposal. My recommendation to the board is based on the proposal that was presented to us. I won't conjecture about other possible proposals that I haven't seen.
Well, thank you. Second question, maybe this is to you, Madam Chairman. Assuming that this committee votes to endorse the commissioner's proposal to deny our request, would it be important for us to be here tomorrow for the formal presentation, or would we merely sort of clutter up the gallery?
We will take our recommendation to the board, and there will be again discussion.
Okay. So you would like for us to be here tomorrow?
Well, we'd love to see you any time, but
Okay, thank you.
I just tell you what the facts are. We will discuss it.
I understand that. I just was not certain whether you wanted us available to the full board tomorrow or not.
There are many members of the board are here today.
Right,
We're just
understood.
missing, Mr. Heldenfels is here on the
Yes,
phone.
I heard his voice earlier. One final thought that I would leave with you. We do understand very thoroughly that we represent a minority opinion in the science community. We do sense, and I believe from reading the technical journals across the spectrums, that even the majority viewpoint understand that the issues of origin of life, origin of the universe, are not testable hypotheses. They're just not. They're outside of science. Nobody was there. You can't reproduce it. If the naturalistic perspective is true, you can't reproduce a million-year theory. It's just not possible to do that. So we are all biased in one way or another. We all have presuppositional beginning points, and it's from that presuppositional beginning point that we then interpret the data, as an archaeologist does, or as a geologist does, or as a criminal forensic scientist does. We try to reconstruct history from what we can observe. And our position has been that the observational science better fits the model that we would suggest we think is the creationist perspective as opposed to the evolutionary one. Having said that, we're very grateful to the Commission, to the coordinating board for challenging us. It's excited us in one sense that we've been very careful to review our material and our curricula to make sure that we've met the TEAC standards as well as the coordinating board standards and the science domains. We feel we've done that. We appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much for taking the time to do that. We will follow, as you suggest, Commissioner, with due process following this, and no doubt we'll see you in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair, with the time to talk with you.
I appreciate everyone's patience. This is an important issue. We wanted to hear from everybody. And we've studied very hard, too, on the work you gave us to look at. Thank you for that. Any other comments?
Chairman Phelps?
Oh, hello there, Fred. Welcome.
I have a couple of questions.
All right, good.
If I can ask them long distance. The first is a clarification. One of the people offering testimony earlier referred to Standard 9 as well as Standard 12, but there does not seem to be any issue with Standard 9, which I assume has to do with faculty qualifications, either in Raymond's statement or in Joe's comments. Is that a true or a factual statement?
Mr. Heldenfels, there were some minor questions raised about faculty qualifications, but those did not appear to be breaking points.
So Standard 9 then could not be said to be an issue or a hurdle in the overall consideration of their proposal?
It was of concern to some of the consultants, but not a general one.
The second question I've got, and this could be for either Raymond or Joe, and it's a different tack on some of the questions that were perhaps asked by Dr. Morris or others, but it seems to me that the issue after listening to the testimony is, and then I agree with the statement from Mr. Johnson about not being viewpoint discriminatory. I wonder if that's the criteria that we're also trying to apply in Standard 12 to the curriculum. And I guess my question would be, were the curriculum to objectively present the theory of evolution, objectively teach, compare, and contrast it with creationism, would that curriculum have passed the two questions? One was a question that, Joe, you brought up, that is, what is not taught, and Raymond made the statement that the issue was how it's presented. So from that, I'm asking, I guess, the issue is not the teaching of creationism so much as it is how the other naturalistic point of view is presented and compared. Would that be a fair statement?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
I believe I understood the question, Fred. The issue that scientists and science educators raised time and time again is that evolution is such a fundamental principle of contemporary science and modern science. It's hard to imagine how you could give adequate coverage to the various fields of science without giving the proper attention that they believe it deserves within as a foundational principle of science.
But having said that, does not necessarily preclude the ability to include creationism in the coursework or curriculum.
Well, we'd have to see if a proposal dealt with that issue somewhat differently, but the preponderance of opinion from science and science educators that we received, Fred, was that creation simply isn't an acceptable science perspective.
Well, I guess my comment, and I'm not a voting member of this committee, but my comment would be that the board should make its decision based on strict and objective interpretation of Standard 12 and Chapter 7 of our own rules, and I agree with the perspective that the issue should not be whether or not we, as individuals, agree or disagree with creationism.
Thank you, Fred. I think you said what a lot of us were thinking. Any other comments? Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
What's the motion?
Let's see. I move that we adopt the Commissioner's recommendation to deny the request of the Institute for Creation Research.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Item 4B is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding preliminary authority requests. Item 4B1 is a request from West Texas A&M University for preliminary authority in civil engineering, electrical engineering, and environmental engineering at the bachelor's level. Joe, will you explain this request and give us your recommendation?
You may recall at the last regular committee meeting, we took up several of these preliminary authority requests, and I asked for some additional time on some science and engineering programs at the undergraduate level at some of the smaller institutions. That was West Texas A&M, UT Permian Basin, and UT Tyler. Our concern with all of those was whether we could reasonably expect to have enough students to run programs efficiently and effectively in those disciplines. The staff has been able to review those more carefully and to interact with the administration at those institutions. And as a result of that, we recommend approval of preliminary authority at West Texas A&M for civil engineering, electrical engineering, environmental engineering as additions to their current mechanical engineering program.
Yes, we can take the two together, I guess, but I did want to make one comment, Joe. Thanks to the staff for including the process here. I think that's very helpful to all of us, especially our new members. Let's just take them separately. Do you have a motion? So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. All right. Item 4B2 is a request from the University of Texas of the Permian Basin for preliminary authority in mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, and petroleum engineering at the bachelor's level. Joe?
And staff, again, reviewed these very carefully, worked very closely with Dr. Fannin, and he's here. I see the president is here as well if we have questions for them, but based on that in-depth interaction with them, this is going to be a tough one for them to get and maintain large numbers of students to make these programs run efficiently, but they're well aware of that. They're taking appropriate actions. It's more than a just build it, they will come approach, and because of that, we're confident in recommending preliminary authority.
Move to approve. Second. Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. Item 4C, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee regarding a request from Navarro College to convert the existing extension center in Midlothian, Texas to a branch campus. Joe?
And this is a center that already exists. In order to have a branch campus tax, they would need this to be designated as a branch campus, and that's what this action would do. And I believe we have folks here to answer your questions if you have any.
Any questions? Any discussion? I have a motion. So moved. Ms. Baker moves. And second? Second. Thank you. Made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 4D is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the state plan for Perkins 4. Joe, where are we with this?
We are the same place we've been for, I guess, 3 meetings now. I regret to report to you that we still have no change in the proposed split from what had been a 60-40 to now a 70-30. The plan has been submitted to the federal government. It went in April 1st, and since there is continuing discussion with the TEA and the State Board of Education, my recommendation to you is that we continue to do nothing on this one.
So do we need to table it then?
You can table it again, yes, please.
Move to table. Move to table. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Item's tabled. Thank you. Item 4E, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee of repealing Chapter 12 concerning career schools and colleges, repealing Chapter 7 concerning private and out-of-state public post-secondary educational institutions operating in Texas, and adopting a new Chapter 7 concerning degree-granting colleges and universities other than public institutions. The public comment just ended in April, but you received supplementary materials that showed the non-substantive changes. And my computer was not happy with having to sit to it, complain. But tell us where we are.
Sure. These have been posted following the standard procedures for rule changes, and that posting for public comment ended on Monday at 5 o'clock. So we took all of the comments that have been received up through that time, and those are summarized on the, I guess it's 6 pages immediately behind the yellow sheet that you have before you. And then the recommended additional changes are shown in the strike over and highlighted sections in 6 pages that follow that. Let me summarize where we were trying to go with all of this. In reality, what you have on the yellow pages, I don't think changes things much, and that's certainly one of the requirements for adopting rules, is that changes made after posting can only be minor and non-substantive. What we were trying to do with the merger of the old Chapter 7 and 12 was to make them more readable, make them easier for people to follow, to clarify the process by which we could recognize accrediting agencies, and to refine the rules for an alternative certification. So much of this was really, if I may use the term, a cut and paste to eliminate redundancy. The standards, like that Standard 12 that we just spent so much time talking about, appeared, I think, in 4 different places in the old rules under each different type of certificate of authority. We moved all of those to one place so that we had one clear statement of standards. We pulled together the standards that are the procedures that implement 2 different sections of a law, Chapter 32 and Chapter 61, put them all in the same place because they are in fact the same procedures, and from the perspective of an institution seeking a certificate of authority, we thought they needed to be able to figure it out without having to go hire a lawyer to read our rules, which was kind of
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a just tremendous improvement, but I would remind everybody that it's such a huge job that it'll probably come back with tweaking as we work through it and see what works and what doesn't work. Isn't that right, John?
It will indeed. We've had good dialogue with some of the national accrediting agencies, and I think in the process, at least, I have learned quite a bit. We think there's probably some further refinement in the language we use for the standards, although it won't change any of the underlying principles of those standards. And we can probably develop language for our own certificates of authority that would more closely resemble those of the accrediting agencies. That'll be the big change that we'll probably bring back to you in July. But what this does, as it stands before you now, is to go ahead and put it out there in a way that makes it easier for people to follow, will allow us to proceed with the processing of applications from the national accrediting agencies, and bring back to you in July recommendations for recognition of additional accrediting agencies.
Thank you, Joe. Any more discussion? Do I have a motion that we accept the new rules?
Make a motion.
Second. Made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The last item for the Academic Excellence and Research Committee is agenda item 4F, consideration of adopting the Advisory Committee on Research Programs. Programs recommendation relating to grants to be awarded under the 2007 Norman Hackerman Advanced Research Program. And Dr. Linda Donald-Smith will explain this to us and give us ACORP's recommendation. Hi, Linda.
Hello. Thank you very much, Mrs. Phillips. Most of you are familiar with the Advanced Research Program, but we thought you might like for us to introduce the awards by briefly mentioning the history of this important program. The Advanced Research Program and the Advanced Technology Program were created by the Texas Legislature in 1987 to fund research projects by faculty members at Texas higher education institutions. This was a very brave group of people. Oil was selling for less than $10 a barrel. The Advanced Research Program funds basic research at public higher education institutions. The legislature at that time appropriated $20 million for the basic research program, and from 1987 through 2005 2001 was able to provide approximately the same level of funding. In 2003, Texas, like most other states, experienced general revenue shortfalls. You remember the dot-com demise, and the ARP was not funded. In 2005, the legislature was able to provide $8 million in funding for these programs, and it was recommended that the state use this funding to support basic research through the ARP to provide a better fit with the governor's Emerging Technology Fund. In 2007, the legislature doubled that amount of funding. We're up to $16.7 million for the advanced research program now. This is the board's 10th round of grants for the ARP, as we call the advanced research program. Only faculty at public institutions of higher education are eligible to compete for this funding. We use peer review. The enabling legislation for the program specified that the coordinating board should allocate these funds based on peer review. In announcing the program back in '87, Governor Hobby said that the coordinating board was to put a high fence around the money so that only high jumpers, the best researchers with the best projects, would be able to access it. Where do the reviewers come from? These are our peer reviewers. They come from out-of-state academic institutions, in-state and out-of-state industry, and government labs. None of the reviewers have an affiliation with a Texas higher education institution. 3 individuals with expertise in physical science and engineering helped us recruit the reviewers. The names of the panel chairs are listed on your handout. If you go to the salmon-covered page, you see the panel chairs at the bottom. The names and affiliations of the 83 reviewers will be listed on our website after the board completes their consideration of these awards tomorrow. We think our reviewers are the most important part of this whole process, and we believe that they are very good. The Advisory Committee on Research Programs, ACOR, met here on Monday in that room, and they were really impressed with how many distinguished scientists and engineers we had on the panels, and they urge us in the future to actually catalog the number that are members of the national academies, the National Academy of Science, National Academy of Engineering, or Institute of Medicine. The coordinating board has an advisory committee on research programs, that's ACOR. This committee is comprised of 8 members, and you see them also on the salmon-covered sheet. They're from academic institutions and industry, and they are eminent scientists and engineers in Texas. 4 members of the national academies, and 1, Dr. Robert Curl of Rice University, is a Nobel laureate. ACOR is led by Dr. Bill Welch. He's the former director of the Air Force's Armstrong Laboratory in San Antonio. ACOR meets quarterly, typically 2 or 3 weeks before you meet, and they play a very active role in providing direction for all aspects of research programs. In July, the board approved the program announcement that was recommended to them by ACOR. In July, these announcements were published on our arpatp.com website. Email messages were sent to sponsored programs officers, research executives, and investigators at public higher education institutions throughout the state to alert them to the availability of the program announcements. We built quite a list of contact information for scientists and engineers throughout Texas, and we're able to email these several thousand people. It's like 5,000 people that we're emailing. Submissions. The ARP uses a 2-step process to reduce the amount of time faculty members spend developing proposals for this very highly competitive program. The first step involves submission of a short pre-proposal. It's a process that we've been using for a number of cycles now. The NIH is looking at its own review criteria, and it is recommending, there is a recommendation for the NIH to go through a pre-proposal process. Each pre-proposal is evaluated by 2 experts. If at least one of these 2 reviewers votes yes, a full proposal is invited. All the submissions and reviews are conducted electronically through our online system. In October last year, we received 1,925 pre-proposals, so there's a lot of interest in this program. The reviewers invited 527 full proposals. We made recommendations to the number for the reviewers to pass through, based on a 25% success rate at the proposal level. In January 2008, we received 520 full proposals. Dale Cherry, who serves very ably as an application designer, a database manager, and all-around troubleshooter for us, he has also served as an advisor for our principal investigators, individual reviewers, and review panels, and he's designed, along with Casey Kennedy, who's our web director here, most of the electronic systems that we use to make this a manageable task, to make it financially efficient for both the coordinating board and the state. The full proposals were reviewed by more than 80 reviewers sitting on 9 panels. This is the third competition where most of our review panels met by a series of teleconference calls. This approach works because a member of our staff developed an online tool that tracks the progress of the proposal selection process. It makes all of the proposals before the panel available to the reviewers. It tracks the funding categories they assign and the rankings. Okay, in late March of this year, we brought in 2 panels of experts to review proposals submitted to the 2 biological sciences research areas. These are our biggest panels. These work better in full-face considerations. 7 other panels met by the teleconference calls in March and early April to review those proposals. The teleconference panels would typically meet 3 times. The first meeting was a 20-minute introductory conference call, followed by 2 additional calls of approximately 90 minutes duration each. Coordinating board staff members sat in on each conference call. The electronic application allowed each reviewer on the teleconference call to review the changes in funding categories and ranks for all proposals on the fly as the panels worked. Since the last competition, staff from our Information Resources Group had established wireless internet access throughout this building and in the boardroom and in the Lone Star room where the biological sciences panels met. Most panel members followed the proceedings and refined their reviews on their laptops as the panel decisions were displayed on these large screens. I'm talking now about the 2 panels that met on the site. As a result, the panels were able to work efficiently and effectively. We've gotten the 200 cubic feet of paper out of this process.
Good, congratulations.
Yeah.
Okay, and it has helped the reviewers work more efficiently. They focus all of their attention now on the proposals. The recommendation before you is directly taken from the review panel's recommendations with one modification. The legislature specifies that no more than 70% of the funds may be allocated to the University of Texas and Texas A&M system schools. This places an upper limit on the amount of awards that can be made to schools in those 2 systems. They can win lower, they just cannot exceed 70%. For this round, awards to schools in the University of Texas and Texas A&M systems based solely on the panel rankings were slated to receive 82% of the funds. Therefore, the lowest ranked system proposals from each of the research areas were dropped from funding, and the highest ranked but not yet funded non-system proposals were brought into funding to satisfy this rider to the Appropriations Act. The recommendation was reviewed and endorsed by your Advisory Committee on Research Programs when they met here on Monday. We're recommending that you approve the list of grants shown on your handout with the goldenrod cover. They are listed in the back. There are a grand total of 121 awards. Most of our reviewers also review for federal agencies, and they tell us that the projects are as good as those being funded by those agencies. We're funding 24% of the full proposal submissions, or if you looked at those 1,925 pre-proposal submissions, the success rate would be 6.3%. We're recommending in considering this that you consider expanding it to allow both the commissioner and the board chair to make additional awards should any of the institutions find it necessary to return an award because a principal investigator is leaving the state, or a principal investigator moves to an independent institution in the state, or perhaps accepts an award from another agency for the same proposed work. This is common with principal investigators who get American Heart Association awards after we've made our awards. You've expressed an interest in being sure that students are involved in these projects, and that is one of our major review criteria. Thousands of undergraduate and graduate students have received experience in leading-edge technologies as a result of these programs. And tomorrow morning, you're going to hear from Bill Welch, Chair of ACOR, about how this has impacted the students. Partnerships. The enabling legislation encouraged partnerships among institutions and across disciplines. This competition is funding 20 multi-institution projects involving in various combinations 20 different higher education institutions. Our reviewers are always impressed with the quality of science and engineering proposals and the commitment the state makes to research through this program. This by itself does much to portray Texas as a research-friendly state with a commitment to quality science and engineering. I'd like to thank our research staff. It's a rather small staff.
How many is it? And I was going to ask you that.
Okay, we've got Jan Heffelder sitting over here, Gayla Peters, Dale Cherry, and part of Reinhold Cornelius. Okay, and thanks to the electronics, we can handle the large number of submissions. It does wear them a little bit around the edges. The longest-serving member is Gayla Peters. She serves as our main contact with the institution's sponsored program officers. She provides excellent counsel to the institutions and principal investigators, and also provides analyses and updates to databases, and she's processed many of the communications and publications related to this competition. Dale Cherry, you see him back there. Okay, served very ably as an application designer and database manager and all-around troubleshooter. He's also served as an advisor for principal investigators, individual reviewers, and the review panels. Dr. Reinhold Cornelius, okay, has worked with our reviewers and our review panels, and both Gayla, Dale, and Reinhold also have another talent you should be aware of. We hauled around those reviewers, there were 31 of them, in 3 15-passenger vans. So they were also our van drivers. They got them to the hotel and to the coordinating board headquarters. Jan Heffelder over here actually worked with the programs in their infancy and then came back several years ago to work with us again. She had entered information on reviewers into our database, initiated and tracked their contracts and reimbursements, and made arrangements for on-site panel meetings. So thank you to all of the staff. So the recommendation before you today is consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board relating, ACORP's recommendation to the board relating to the grants to be awarded under the 2007 Norman Hackerman Advanced Research Program, and authorizing the commissioner and your board chair to make additional awards as funding becomes available. Thank you.
Great. Everybody remember the motion here, I mean, what the recommendation is, but you all are just doing wonderful work, and I don't think we take time enough to sometimes to dwell on the things that we are doing well, and this is a beautiful, exciting report. And thank you all for making this work so well. I think that's allows you to get that fence up even higher, probably.
Right, and we certainly thank the board for everything they did to improve program funding during the last legislative session. You worked very hard on behalf of this program for the scientists and engineers of the state. And we certainly appreciate
Dr. Hackerman lives.
Yes.
Absolutely. Any discussion?
No, but I just wanted to say a terrific program and a very nice presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Laura?
Is this the first year that there's been a cap on the University of Texas system and A&M system?
No, I believe that has been in place since the programs began.
Has been in place since the program.
Okay, David would know, right.
Along those same lines, if there are teams of joint proposals across system, are they weighted differently?
Okay, we do have 20 collaborative proposals in the mix, and in order, we did not drop any proposals with non-system funding when we worked to satisfy that rider. In order to bring a proposal up that was a mix, it had to have at least 50% of non-system funding in it before we'd bring it up. We did have one proposal, but it was largely system. It had $9,000 going to a non-system school, and we couldn't bring that one up. it wouldn't be fair to drop a higher ranked system proposal to bring that one up. So Joe was helpful in arriving at how to handle these, and that's one of the guidelines we use.
Joint proposals are encouraged.
Yes, they are. In fact, in your program.
System, and
Yes.
so therefore,
And there are a number of those in there if you look at the...
they have to be real, not so skewed.
That's right.
Okay, we do have in the program announcement that you approved a provision for a bonus proposal where a principal investigator from a large research institution pairing with a smaller institution was allowed to put an extra pre-proposal in the mix if it was a large-small pairing. And so we are looking at the larger institutions helping increase the capability of the smaller ones.
Brilliant, that's great. Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion happily carries.
Thank you very much.
We are now going to move into the part of our joint meeting, which is participation in success, but I thought we would take a 5-minute break.
I love you.
Yes, thank you.
Really 5 minutes, though, because we need to mush on.
Continuation of the committee meetings, we called for a joint committee meeting, and this is now the Committee on Participation and Success. And I'm Laurie Bricker, I'm chair of the committee, and I want to welcome all the board members here and Vice Chair Lynn Phillips. As well as, in my opening remarks, I'm really going to save what I want to say about what's going on tomorrow for the board meeting, but I do want to publicly thank Dr. Judy Laredo for your work thus far. She's been with us for, what, a month? 2 months? And I appreciate your enthusiasm and your commitment and your leadership, and I also appreciate the fact that you're keeping us informed on a weekly basis of all the things that you're doing. And I believe that you have some introductions to make, too.
I do. With great pleasure, and I know where did they disappear to?
Brenda, would you push her mic over there?
Thank you, Ms. Phillips and Dr. Bricker. I want to get here with these wires. I want to thank you for that nice introduction, and I can honestly say that in my 7 weeks here, I do not know where the time has gone. I get to work on Monday, and before I know it, it's Friday. But I think it's because of the passion and challenge that we have before us, and the fact of the team that I am working with. It just has really made it exciting to just go for it and to make that reality of 2015 exactly what we want it to be. So I've had a wonderful time. Just a wonderful time being here. It's been a learning curve, learning the agency and learning people and learning my way around. But aside from that, it's great. I do have the pleasure, though, the rest of my staff is also with me, but I have 2 new people that have joined the coordinating board, one more recently than the other, but Dr. Paul Reese, who is in the back, you might want to stand up, Paul, has joined the coordinating board as Senior Director for Outreach, working in our unit. He's got lots of initiatives under him, and Paul has just hit the ground running. His vast background in P16 councils, not only in Texas but across the nation, is just phenomenal. I don't even want to tell you how many there are, but extensive. In addition to that, Dr. Reese comes to us with a vast background from Education Trust, where he was a co-founder of that institution. And so his background knowledge in our initiative of P16 and in the area of the councils is quite evident in what I have seen him do in the short 2 weeks entering the 3rd week that he has been here. So we're just delighted to have him. I'm honored to have the pleasure to work with him and to have him on this team, and I know you will see tremendous results coming from his efforts in his unit. The other person who is brand new to the coordinating board by about 4 hours is Dr. Susan Barnes, and she is sitting in the back.
Welcome.
And Dr. Barnes is no stranger to education. In fact, I've known Dr. Barnes for many years. Her background not only in public education, but in educator preparation and accountability. She has been an associate commissioner at TEA. I met her in our teacher preparation days, which is just a few years ago, not that many years ago. But her vast background and knowledge is going to be leading the unit in the P16 division that addresses educator quality, and more specifically that addresses the educator preparation as we look at those college readiness standards and the infusion and alignment with TEKS and what we will be doing with the university deans and head colleges of education. So I'm really excited to have her. As I said, this is her first day, and she's only been here 4 hours.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dr. Laredo. I also want to welcome our two newest members to the agency. I have to say that both of you, your reputations precede you, and that is a very positive statement to make. Dr. Ruiz, I've known of your work through Education Trust for a very, very long time and admired you and your leadership, and we're thrilled to have you. And he's actually already gotten his feet wet in Houston in a very long driving tour all over Houston, as well as participation in the Greater Houston P16 Council. So thank you and welcome. And Dr. Barnes, the very first time I ever heard you, a few years ago, you were presenting on behalf of the commissioner, and I knew then how amazing you were and what kind of cross-trained knowledge you have across the entire TEA agency, and that is so vital to the work that we're doing here, is to have that expertise. So we're really, really excited to have you here. So congratulations and welcome to both of you. Our first item of business is item 6A, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to amendments to sections 22.102, 22.105, and 22.107 through 22.113 of Board Rules concerning provisions for the scholarship programs for vocational nursing students. Are there any questions?
Did we receive any comments?
No. Okay. May I have a motion?
I move we adopt.
Second?
It's a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. By saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6B is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to amendments to sections 22.122, 22.123, 22.125, and 22.127 through 22.133 of Board Rules concerning the provisions for the scholarship programs for professional nursing students. May I have a motion to adopt the rules as proposed?
So moved.
Second. Move in a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6C is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to amendments to sections 21.2003 through 21.2005 of Board Rules concerning the Kenneth H. Ashworth Fellowship Program. Any discussion or questions? May I have a motion?
Move adoption.
Is a motion second?
Second?
Okay, any questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6D is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to repealing sections 21.727 through 21.736 of Board Rules and adopting new sections 21.21 through 21.30 of Board Rules concerning determination of resident status and waiver programs for certain non-resident persons. Any comments or questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6E is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to repealing sections 21.620 through 21.636 of Board Rules concerning the Matching Fund Employment Program for professional nursing students. Any questions? Everybody thinking of Nancy Neal?
Yes, we are. I move we adopt.
Okay, motion made by Lynn Phillips. Is there a second? Second by Bob Wingo. Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6F is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to repealing sections 21.650 through 21.666 of Board Rules concerning the Matching Fund Employment Program for vocational nursing students. Any comments or questions? I have a motion.
Moved.
Motion, who made that? Motion made by Bob Wingo. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lynn Phillips. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6G is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to repealing sections 22.1 through 22.2 of Board Rules concerning provisions for the Special Leveraging Educational Assistance Grant Program for students at independent institutions. Any discussion? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Lynn Phillips, second by Elaine Mendoza. Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6H is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to repealing sections 22.41 through 22.42 of Board Rules concerning provisions for the Leveraging Education Assistance Grant Program. May I have a motion to adopt the rules?
So moved.
Motion by Bob Wingo, a second by Lynn Phillips. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6I is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to repealing sections 22.181 through 22.186 of Board Rules concerning provisions for the Texas Tuition Assistance Grant Program. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Elaine Mendoza, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob Wingo. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6J is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the approval of 2008 through 2009 teacher quality grants to improve the teaching of mathematics and science in elementary, middle, and secondary schools. Any discussion? I have a question. Dr. Laredo, how many applicants, do you know how many applicants there typically are, and as opposed to how many are selected? And if this is, if we feel that we have the proper outreach to make sure that everyone knows to apply for this, because it's a significant grant.
Elizabeth can tell us the exact number. I don't have it on the top of my head, but I would say that as you look at the supporting documentation, the funding is across every region of the state.
I saw that.
There's also a cross-section of elementary, middle school, and high school. And they're also addressing the three areas, which would either be science or mathematics or the combination of the two. And it also represents a cross-section of institutions in terms of who has been funded. But the actual total number, what was the total number of applications you received, Elizabeth?
This year we received 90. We generally receive anywhere between 90 and 120, so we fund between 55 and 70%. And we use a process to notify the institution very similar to the one that Linda uses. Department chairs, it's very hard to keep up with because faculty move, but we try to contact and go through websites and make sure somebody has found a way to identify all the faculty who might be working, get email addresses. In professional organizations, they're very generous about letting us use their listservs. So there's a variety of ways we try to reach them.
Is this also on our website? Because I know there's a place that says grants. It's also on our website?
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to say, too, having had a grant in my previous life, the teacher quality program goes out extensively to not only provide the information, but provide the training for how to even apply for a grant. Because they conduct that, and I guess it's in November, isn't it? And so they go the extra mile. They don't just send you the notice and then the RFP and say apply.
That's great.
And this year, we had several institutions that we've never had before, and part of that is because the Associate Director, Josephine Hamilton, who you met, and I, when we're in a region, we try to reach out to the universities who have not had a grant in the past, just see if they're interested, if their faculty want to talk to us. So it's a way for them to understand how you would apply for it, what it entails. That's a slower process, but it's actually more effective because that face-to-face.
This is a well-known grant program. It's been in place in one form or another for at least 20 years.
At least.
And so it's a matter of keeping new people informed.
That's great. I'm glad I asked that question.
And they do that. A small staff does a miracle amount of work to get this out.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I have a motion. So moved. Motion by Lynn Phillips. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob Wingo. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 7A is consideration of adopting minutes from the March 6, 2008 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Elaine Mendoza. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob Wingo. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 7B is consideration of the web portal proposal, and there will be a report and presentation by Matt Oram. We've been waiting a very long time to hear this. We're very, very excited, and we can't wait to hear it. Matt is the director of the College Access Initiative at the UT system. Thank you for being here and for being a part of us, and a part of the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board now.
That's correct.
I would also like to add, with Matt's presence, that we've really begun to move in this area. In fact, we have set designated meetings every Monday afternoon from 3:30 to 4:30, so a team here at the co-board, along with Matt's leadership, are moving this initiative forward. So,
Well, I know you've been meeting with him because that particular department at UT is the only department that calls us the co-board. So you picked up on it, I know that it's true.
it just shortens it.
Have you ever heard it called that? Ever?
Occasionally.
Some people say CB.
I think that language is actually in my report. I'll have to.
That's a Marina Walm thing.
That's a Marina Wall, yes, the co-board. So, thank you for inviting me today, Madam Chair, and the committee. I was on the last agenda, but I'm pleased to be here today. We've actually made some significant progress since the last committee meeting, and so I'd like to present that to you today. I'll try to keep it short. I've got written remarks to keep me on track, so I don't ramble on. So, the purpose of this project is, and my presence here is to give you an update on where Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and its partner agencies and institutions are heading to develop a one-stop shop for student web portal for Texas. Next slide, please. The U.S. Secretary of Education has pointed out that access to higher education is unduly complex, and the interplay of inadequate preparation, lack of information about college opportunities, and persistent financial barriers limit access. This is certainly the case. However, it also seems that whenever a new need is identified, a new resource is created. These often duplicate other resources, and unfortunately, most do not provide the services tied to real student data in real time that can help students with specific actions. Students need to evaluate their education. They need to finish high school college ready, enter college, obtain a degree, and join the workforce. Our purpose and the purpose of the work for the web portal is to provide clear and available tools. There's also significant obstacles in these multiple systems for those of us who are in the business of helping students. In focus groups and interviews I conducted of high school guidance counselors, they identified the lack of comprehensive web-based supports for college and career guidance and pointed out inconsistencies among available resources. Counselors expressed a real need, especially for their at-risk students, for a single source that is both easy to use and powerful enough to actually assist students through the complexities of going to college. Based on our Texas research, there is simply an overload of web services with little to no collaboration. The critical issue is that the disorienting array of competitive technologies that currently assist students may in fact unnecessarily cause confusion and limit opportunities. The Wild West of resources and considerable investments that students, parents, schools, districts, colleges, businesses, and foundations are making in computing technologies may not be an effective or best use of resources for closing the gaps. Next slide. These are the steps that the Higher Education Coordinating Board and its partners are taking to address these issues. These steps were modeled in part on a successful collaborative web portal in the state of North Carolina. Texas has a well-developed case to build a system that can help tens of thousands of students find their way to post-secondary education, graduation, and successful employment. The case made by Closing the Gaps, Murdoch's demographic report, Perryman's economic report, and the widely publicized concern over college affordability make an effective argument to improve collaborative efforts to increase college access and success. Identifying all the potential stakeholders in the decision-making and planning process from the very beginning was seen as a must-do. Other states have learned this lesson the hard way and have had to go back to the drawing board after not initially securing essential partners. The Commissioner has identified and sent out appointment letters to a large working committee that includes state agency staff at TEA, TWC, DIR, DARS, and the Governor's Office, as well as 24 other members from K-12 higher education, nonprofit organizations, and business to help come together to help guide the project. This committee had its first meeting at the end of March, and we will meet again in May to define the scope of work and begin the work of removing the barriers towards getting this project done. There has to be will and commitment of the key leaders in the state and an agreement among the stakeholders as to the common goal for this project. Members of the Collaborative Working Committee, the larger group, are currently developing or looking at developing MOUs between stakeholders and developing teams to address specific issues such as technology, legal, the other kinds of issues that need to be worked out. The legislature, we feel, has passed House Bill 1 to help foster just this kind of collaborative. And of course, the guidance and support from this board will be essential to achieving current goals and long-term success. Identifying a technological solution. With input from the Collaborative Working Committee and from staff at TEA, we had a meeting yesterday with TEA staff on this subject. We've come together to begin the work of reviewing research and identifying the specific requirements for a technological solution that fits the needs and priorities of the state and also works with some of the significant resources that are already out there. These committees will meet as often as possible between now and throughout the summer. Our goal is issuing a phased RFP as soon as this summer for the stages of the project. Funding options are currently being pursued for the program development, infrastructure, launch, and marketing. I'm working with members of the Higher Education Coordinating Board, grant writing staff, and the College for All Texans Foundation to submit proposals for several major Texas foundations. Long-term sustainable funding may come from various sources as identified by all the stakeholders. When looking at the cost benefit of increasing the college going rate in the state with the long-term return of better educated and more employable workers, the costs seem like a very wise investment. Next slide. Looking at the current landscape, there are successful programs and there are also significant gaps in resources. In the evaluation of current web-based support systems for college and careers, I look for exemplar websites. These sites not only simplified information and streamlined services, but use technology in a way to act as a strategic driver to achieve goals. As a step in the right direction, the Higher Education Coordinating Board will integrate certain key services that are already under its immediate control. College for All Texans, Apply Texas, and the financial aid estimator that is being developed right now based on the TexasCollegeMoney.org model. All these will be rolled in to be seamless and one service. This seamless suite of services will be rolled out to schools and post-secondary institutions of a sign of things to come. And this work will happen immediately, and we will begin. We are already meeting on this at the board. So it will offer a one-stop shop for college education selection, financing, and application. So that's a good step in the right direction. The second phase to develop the larger comprehensive web portal is also in progress simultaneously with research from the field that is included in the draft business plan that you have, a survey of Texas superintendents and others. The Collaborative Working Committee, the larger group, and staff from the board and at TEA are working to identify the laundry list of services, requirements, technical specifications, legal requirements, data capability, and data security. Phase 3 and 4 involve the request for proposals for vendor services and products that will meet the needs identified by the coordinating board and its partners. The timeline on the next slide. very hard to read there, but is in your business plan, it's somewhat self-explanatory and detailed, but it's also ambitious, and I recognize that. We've been planning for a good year now, though, and we're ready to start doing some real moving on this. I've developed a host of technology projects or been involved, and found that a key aspect to getting them off the ground and getting them done is to get them off the ground and get them done on time. And, you know, as additions and changes can be made and bugs can be worked out, but the initial technology release should follow a fast track to serve the public as soon as possible. Rolling out the service is critical to its success, and using the model from North Carolina, you'll see a good deal of time in this timeline and effort spent for counselor and school awareness raising and training. Integrating the system with K-12 schools and their planning activities will be critical to driving usage. Next slide. I'll just leave you with a few principles that are helping the working committee and the Higher Education Coordinating Board guide this project as we move forward. Again, I can't emphasize enough, collaboration is key, and this is being pursued through the larger collaborative working committee. Current technologies need to be integrated, and the future technologies that are coming need to be flexible enough to meet the needs, changing needs of the state and our populations. The students will be the center of all activities, and they are our customers and our primary focus of this project. It's their future home for their educations that we're building here. Stakeholders need real-time data and analytical feedback to make decisions and evaluate the program and its services. With that, I can take questions on this.
Right. This is very exciting.
Thank you. I think so, too.
Questions? Elaine?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. When we talk about collaboration, is that also reaching out to some perhaps private sector tools that are available? I think we learned the hard way how we can build something parallel to what's out in the private sector or generally available through other organizations.
We identified some aspects of the portal that currently exist, but that were developed by internal partners. But I think overall you're absolutely right, and the point that there's going to be RFPs for development of major parts of this. There are technological solutions out there. There are whole companies set up to do this for different states. We've reviewed a lot of those. A lot of them have tried to sell this product to a number of different people for the state of Texas. And what we want to see is that the collaboration looks at a competitive process and finds the best tool to purchase and to develop the stuff that needs to be developed, but to find the best tool possible to purchase out of the box.
Good. And the definition of student is?
Student is a life. I feel like I'm a student. I'm actually a current graduate student also. It's a lifetime student, and I think adult learner populations actually are this is a key tool for adult learner populations who are even more disconnected from counseling and services.
Exactly. That's what I was pointing at. So, thank you.
Good answer. Other questions, comments? I have a couple questions. First of all, you said three things that were really, really important. You said immediately, as soon as possible, and right away. So whatever else you do, that's great. I mean, because that's where we are, is really needing some action on this, because it's so important. A couple of comments. North Carolina, it's interesting because throughout the years, school districts in Texas have always compared themselves to school districts in North Carolina, in particular Charlotte-Mecklenburg, because they were kind of on the cutting edge of accountability long before Texas was, and both Texas and North Carolina pretty much were the catalyst behind a lot of accountability throughout the nation. So I think it's great that we're once again getting a lot of information from North Carolina, and I'm sure that they get a lot from us as well.
If you would like, I have some data from North Carolina on what they've actually achieved.
Sure.
Can you bring the present? Oh, she just took it down.
Uh-oh.
think it's in here, is it not?
Yeah.
It is in there. Basically, they launched their site in 2001 with 37 million hits, and had 168 million hits last year. College for Texans had 1.3 million hits. That's just hits, but they have 2 million student accounts that were created. Most of those were students sitting down with a counselor and creating an account. And Texas has 0 in that category. So, they have managed to go from, go ahead and go to the next slide. I guess they're at the top of that list. You can't really see from that, but that didn't really come out. But okay, on those that made positive change, Texas is somewhere at 0.8% of changes in participation rates since '99, and North Carolina was the highest on that list. Improvement rate was something like 3.9. So they've managed to move the needle, where most states have slipped back. Texas has moved by, I think, 0.8. This is from the Mortensen Post-Secondary Education Opportunity Report. So David's ruling.
A couple of other comments. Yesterday, there was a speaker in Houston sponsored by NCAN, and I noticed that you've got David Swedlow listed. National College Access Network. There was a speaker that was sponsored by them and also by Houston A+ Challenge. And the speaker, Dr. Patricia, I think I want to say McCullough, might have been McDonough, from UCLA.
Leading authority on counseling.
What's her last name?
McDonough.
McDonough, okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that she said that struck me was she was talking a lot about counselors, and it dawned on me that I'm wondering if counselors ever get access during the time that they're in college learning to be counselors. I wonder if they ever get training on how to be a college supportive counselor in a school. In other words, if they have that kind of training. And so I slipped an email real quickly to one of my favorite deans at U of H, and he said that, it's really difficult with all the pedagogy and all the things that are required to put that in, but it seems like a missed opportunity if we don't look at something like this, at least in the form of presentations to counselors in training that are in colleges throughout Texas, so that when they graduate, they know how to work with students and know what information they need.
That's an excellent point, and there's a whole untapped, actually, market for the kind of instruction you're talking about. College access counseling and training and improving that training and maybe standardizing that training, because there's a lot of it kind of goes on just piecemeal. You find that it's your best counselor, college access counselor in a school is somebody who sent 3 or 4 kids to college themselves, and that's how they know what they know. And so there are ways to standardize that, and McDonough has actually developed an online course at UCLA for college access training that in my other hat at the UT system, we're looking at pulling together another collaborative with the Counseling Association here, the Texas Counseling Association, to develop calling it TOCA, I think, the Texas Online Course for College Access Counseling, or College Access.
Let me connect a couple dots here. I'm not familiar with that, but Judy could tell you more, but she's met with the Texas Counselors Association about, and they've also met with the commissioner about something similar to that. And that's underway, and that, in fact, one thing that Susan Barnes will be working with as well is when we talk about educator quality, we're not just talking teachers, we're talking counselors, we're talking administrators. So there's a broader effort across all these areas that's going to have to be coordinated to do that. Frequently what happens in Texas is that individual institutions will bring in counselors to sell them on their schools, and that's about the extent of it. But there's a publication that the Texas Counselors Association has that they're wanting to build on, and you may want to say something briefly about that.
I met with Jan Freese, the executive director of the Counseling Association, soon after I got here, and she is just very excited about wanting to connect with the coordinating board to address the issue of counselors being able to better advise and prepare students for matriculating into a college environment. In addition to the fact she's even looking at the inclusion of the college readiness standards. Her association is into the manual that is used with the counselors. And going the other step, which Matt is making reference to, is even affecting their preparation at the certification level, which would include those same agendas.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, and Paul, Dr. Reese, is working on some initiatives that also would affect the retooling of college counselors and even high school counselors in the K-12 arena that he is going to be bringing forth. So Jan and her organization and the team of us will be coming to the table to look at that. It is a vital component and is desperately needed. What counselors do, if they do their counseling in terms of really advising students, it's because they've tooled themselves on their own. They really have begun to do that kind of research. But unfortunately, with the public agenda in public schools, sometimes they get lost in other avenues and are not able to do it as well. But the Counseling Association definitely sees the need.
One thing that Matt could tell you more about if you wanted to know about it is, but briefly, I had the occasion to meet with an individual from North Carolina that Matt brought in before they met with the committee, and one thing that he mentioned that I thought was important was that their website is actually used as a part of the curriculum in the public schools, which means that there's an aggressive on-the-ground aspect to it beyond the technology, and in my mind, that's the most challenging aspect of this.
All those college days, all those kind of things that have a focus in North Carolina, and it's to go into the portal to establish accounts, to really get the, again, specific actions that you need to do done, and you can do that through their portal. So they have worked it into the curriculum in both English and math and courses, but they've also, from the very beginning, they realized that the counselors were a crucial component to rolling out that product. And so they, on the first development staff, they had a member from the ranks of licensed professional counselors on that to work with other counselors. And that person was actually provided by their K-12 agency. That was a partner and was paid for by the K-12 agency. So, and what that person does all year long is train counselors to use the system, and now is training districts to train their counselors to use the system, or service centers to train the system. So,
another thing that's happening is that you'll recall that the board has $1 million grant in Houston, which works with the counselors and developing some of these things as well. So there are a number of things I think that are beginning that will help make that happen, but it's going to cut across a number of areas.
Just so this doesn't come out wrong, I'm going to preface my comments by saying that 15 years ago, I chaired a peer committee on guidance and counseling, and one of the recommendations was that counselors need to be counseling and not doing all these other extraneous things and all. So I am a very big supporter of counselors. However, one of the things I'd like to suggest is that we take it beyond just counselors and their official status. There are lots of professional organizations and lots of people that have been hired by schools with the high school allotment for college-bound activities. And so a lot of the college access coordinators are not counselors. And so I'd like to make sure that we're not just training counselors. It would be really incredible if a lot of the professional organizations and their conferences throughout the state, if we have this kind of impact and you could present to them so that they, it would spread beyond, my vision of it is that at every single high school and then trickling down to middle and elementary, that not just the counselors and not just the college access coordinators, but the entire staff could be well versed, because very often, as we all know, a student will have a favorite teacher, and that's the one that gets them excited about going to college.
I know North Carolina is training teachers as well, and also, people, all kinds of people from post-secondary education to nonprofit institutions who are doing this kind of work out in the field. And yes, not all of them are from the ranks of the licensed professional counseling or Masters in Counseling programs. But I just make a linguistic distinction, and
Oh, no, that's fine.
there's the counselors, the school counselors, and then there are college advisors. And those advisors can come from all different sorts. We have UT system volunteers all across the state now that we've mobilized to start providing, opportunities to them to provide assistance in advising. And I would like to see them have tools that they can use. Everyone that does this kind of work out in the field that helps a student will have a tool they can use to take specific action.
Well, and it seems also that, for example, like at Teach for America or some of the alternative certification programs, that there would be an opportunity to present to them so that they would have that knowledge base, because some of them are the most inspiring and enthusiastic teachers that we have, and that would be an amazing opportunity for them to encourage our kids as well.
You have your AmeriCorps and your Vista
AmeriCorps,
and all those kinds of services who are in need of something. There's a dizzying array of different things, but very few of them actually do anything for students. And so
another outcome I would hope is that we would eventually have a link that would go on every single ISD and offered to private schools as well, a link that would take anyone through this and all kinds of college access information. It dawned on me, and Lynn, you and I were talking about this, a couple of years ago, we had a presentation from one of the school districts, and they showed 4- and 5-year-olds marching across the stage with their graduation, with the banners that said different universities all over the country of where they were going to go to college. And I was looking for that the other day on their website, and it's not there anymore. And so it dawned on me that very few school districts have anything on their website that talks about a college-bound culture. So I think it's up to us to provide that and support them so that they can have the tools that they need, the resources that they need, so that can trickle into all of their schools.
Phase one of this plan is that rolling together of the things that the coordinating board already oversees, the College for All Texans and the Apply Texas, which is the common application in Texas, and the financial aid tool. And to roll those together and then to push them into exactly where you want. So as that thing of what, something else is coming, but this is what you need to get up there now. I believe that will be branded under the College for All Texans brand. I think we're not talking College for Texans anymore, so it's the College for All Texans
We
brand.
put all back in. That's
Yeah, so...
Matt's already on top of this. I shared with him your comments the other day, and so you can see he's already...
We've already thought of
I can tell.
And so to roll that, and, we had a meeting yesterday with senior executives from the TEA, and one of them said, I really could have used that last week when I was doing something for his daughter. It was the financial aid estimator. That would have been useful. And, I think it's easy to get buy-in if you can get, again, all those things together and not just, you want to offer the opportunities, people need to have the opportunities, but they also need to address affordability issues, which is really unnecessarily discouraging a lot of students from even taking planning or those kinds of actions, and then guiding them into the application and so that they can get in. Ultimately, there are certain things you have to do to actually go, and especially for an at-risk population, offering them a single source for that.
What's important about what he's saying is that to get resources to students right away, and what you'll see immediately will not be what it will eventually be.
Yeah.
And that you can build that up, but rather than waiting to build the perfect system,
Yes.
which could take 5 years, and you probably never have, you build yourself up, and we'll have something in place, I believe.
This summer.
That's excellent.
And so that the schools can roll it into their planning for the fall.
I wonder if we could also encourage the schools to not only keep track of all of their students that are going to college, but also have some sort of celebration, like a wall, like some high high schools do, or a publication like some schools do, one of which is their alma mater. They actually, the PTO actually pays for a publication from Lamar High School of every single child and where they're going to college. And I mean, that's a huge motivator. And it would be nice if, you know, I know that we want to encourage and be a good partner with the school districts, and we don't want to overstep our bounds, but I think that anything that we could provide to them as far as a resource would be welcomed.
Anything that can encourage a college-going culture in the schools is going to be a good thing. I mean, we worked a lot, I've worked a lot in these high-need schools, and the ones that make college a priority do things very differently than those that may not. And so there's no reason that I can see that it shouldn't be a priority in every school.
It seems to me one of the things we could do that would really help counselors is to continue our efforts to create that tracking system to relieve them of so much of that, what used to be paperwork. That takes so much of their time. And even if you're going to add a college access person, my experience is that those kind of people who come on board get sucked up into the college counselor's office. And so lifting their workload a little bit would really be a great thing.
I think there's a number of different tools and things that you can offer to counselors. They need feedback, they need tracking, they need to know what's happening to their students and how they're doing, and where the student is in their college-going process.
Now, have you ever gone to the Apply Texas thing and tried to do it yourself?
Yes, I applied to graduate school through that system. At the time, Apply Texas, actually, you found the institutions were offered by application fee. I think they have now put them in alpha order at least, but you have to know where you want to go and what you want to do before you get to Apply Texas. Apply Texas will handle your application. So linking in the real data and reskinning the College for All Texans in a way that it can help someone select an institution and then go seamlessly into Apply Texas from that point, I think is a real value in itself.
Maybe I tried to do it and I couldn't do it. I mean, maybe it's a generational thing, but I couldn't.
They did redesign Apply Texas this last year, so I don't know.
Oh, well, go look at it. It's really really hard.
And that underscores the all part of Texans College for All Texans. We can't exclude the adult learners. For sure. But in all seriousness, I think we've talked heavily about the students within schools, and that's absolutely critical. We just can't forget about the continuum of lifelong learning, which we need a
That
lot of.
underscores that you have to re-examine these periodically, because I don't know how many of you even remember the internet with the Gopher, and you just have a long list of items on the screen, and this is actually, even though it's been redesigned in some way, a fairly old system. Texas got into its original Common Application fairly early, and so it may not reflect.
The funny thing about North Carolina is
that
their original program was modeled after the Common Application created by Texas.
See, I mean, there's a lot of.
And then they
sharing.
went, they built something small, but then they went very
Well, both accountability systems were done simultaneously, so there's a lot that we share with them, which is, it's great. Any other comments? Well, this is very exciting. Thank you so much, and it was well worth waiting for.
Thank you.
Okay, and I show that the recommendation is pending, so there's no motion. Okay. We'll move to item 7C, presentation on high school summer bridge programs, fiscal year 2007 evaluation results. Robin Zaninga, Senior Program Evaluator in Planning and Accountability, will present the information on this agenda item. 7C. Hi.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here to talk about the summer bridge programs. The summer bridge programs were actually the first programs that the research and evaluation team took on when we came on board just a little bit over a year ago. And so I'll try to make my comments brief too, but I will start by giving you an overview of the 2000 programs. These were the ones that were held the summer of 2007. So obviously we've already started working on 2008, so I will give you a little preview of what we're doing for summer of 2008 as well. Okay. The the challenge for the bridge programs was to develop programs that would enhance the success of students and decrease the need for developmental education. And that was the primary goal, overall goal of the programs that we were trying to evaluate and assess. There were two different programs last summer. The high school summer bridge program for rising 11th and 12th graders. So that means students that were coming out of 10th into 11th or out of 11th into 12th. And there was a mix of those programs at the institutions that had these programs. And then there was the developmental education summer bridge program, which some of us have dubbed Rising 13 because it was recent high school graduates, those that had just graduated and were thinking about going to college the next year. Some of them having been accepted, others not. The eligibility for these programs was very specific in legislation. Next one. They had to be at least placing at 2,100 on their 11th grade tax, which made them high school graduate ready, but they were under the 2,200 that made them college ready. So these were students that were in kind of this pivotal point. They just need a little bit of step up, a little bit of push to be college ready. They're not the lowest performing, and they're not those that have already passed the TSIs or the tax at a level where they'd be exempt from the TSIs. So the first thing is, who are these participants? Remember, these are pilot programs. So you'll see that there are a fairly small number because we were testing them out to see how well these programs are working. In the high school programs, there was a total of 782 participants. About half of them, their families were eligible for free or reduced lunch. So that's the proxy that we used for low income. And about 31% of those spoke Spanish in the home. That was much less true in the developmental education programs. These students looked a little bit different from the high school students. Only about a quarter of them were eligible for the free or reduced lunch and said they spoke Spanish at home. We had a fairly high Hispanic population in the high school bridge program. 73% of the students that were admitted into those programs were Hispanic, 10% white, and 14% African American. One of the things that happened because we came in late to this program, we started in June with the evaluation team, and the programs were already well underway. We were working with the University of Texas at Arlington external evaluation. They had set up a database, and unfortunately there were some glitches in the database that didn't allow us to collect Hispanic for the developmental ed programs. It wasn't working correctly. So I was expecting that would have been much higher if we just have an unknown there because we couldn't really collect that information. So I don't find that very reliable at this point. But we also looked at their motivation. We asked them some questions about their plans to go to college. And as you can see, 90% of the high school students and almost 100% of those in the developmental ed program, the Rising 13s, said that they planned to go to college. And that should be surprising because most of the students self-selected. So, especially in the developmental ed college program, although they were not college ready, these were students that were really motivated to go to college. That's why they were there. And the majority of them, the vast majority of both groups, said their parents were encouraging them to go to college. So that means that this is a group that's very highly motivated to go to college already. So not only do they just need a little bit of a push in terms of a step up in their academic content, they already seem to have the motivation in both groups. Okay. The programs themselves vary. Next slide. In size considerably. There were 14 high school programs and 21 developmental education programs last year, with an average of about 50 students for the high school and 40 for the developmental ed. But you can see they ranged from as many as 197 students to the smallest of 8 students in the developmental ed program, in one of the developmental ed programs. They had a lot of difficulty last year recruiting students, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the issues last year was the lateness of the RFP being issued. The lateness of the legislation coming through and then getting the RFP out, it caused them considerable difficulty. They didn't get their money until May, which was late for them to get out. So that explains a lot of the small numbers. We expect that to be very different this year because the RFPs did go out early. They're already recruiting So that shouldn't be a problem in 2008. Next. The evaluation last year had 4 parts to it. There were site visits that were conducted of all of the high school bridge programs by the University of Texas at Arlington. The developmental ed hadn't been budgeted for that, so I personally made 4 site visits to the developmental ed programs. We asked all of the programs to submit an annual report, and we gave them the guidelines for that. We collected cross-site data from them, among which was pre- and post-testing on the TSIs. One of the other difficulties that we ran into last year, because we came in late into the process, was that the sites were all using different tests. Some were using the Compass, some were using the THEA, and that was a problem for our evaluation. So the pre- and post-testing didn't work as smoothly as we would have liked. And in a minute I'll show you the outcomes, and I want you to keep that in mind, because the lack of good data that we had made it very difficult to isolate and identify real effects of the program last year. We also had programs that weren't able to pre- and post-test because of problems with their testing offices, and so we're being very proactive this year to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then we did an end-of-program survey with the students to find out what they liked and didn't like about the program and how much they felt that it helped them. Okay. We were able to put together a program profile from the site visits and the annual reports that they put together and submitted to us. And some of the key characteristics have to do with, first, the curriculum. There was a lot of variation in curriculum, but the best programs were ones that went well beyond teaching to the test. There were some that were extremely creative, that not only introduced students to the content information they need in math and reading and writing, but also did very creative things in introducing them to college life, helping them to identify their own goals. And so we really encourage programs to have a much broader curriculum than just teaching to the test. There were some that did just teach to the test, and that was one of, you'll see, as UT Arlington's recommendations was to discourage that as a mode of operation. Many of them had enrichment and support activities, from career counseling to peer support. Students that were had already graduated from the community college and were in a 4-year institution that then came back and mentored the students that were going through, and those were very positive aspects of those programs. Collaboration with the independent school districts in their area was crucial, especially to recruitment, was the weakest part of almost all of the programs. The ones that had a relationship with their ISDs to begin with did much better, but those that started out without a relationship already in place had a great deal of difficulty getting that in place. Certainly within the time frame, they needed to have a much longer window in order to be able to really effectively get that in place. Not as many programs as I would have liked, but several programs did include parent involvement. Some of them had parent orientations, information to parents. Some of them had, at the end of the program, a reception for all the students, kind of a graduation ceremony with the parents there. So those were very positive things. A few of them included professional development. One of the strongest programs had an entire development process where the faculty that were hired, they came in, they all worked on the curriculum together, and then they taught the curriculum. And that was one of the most creative programs of all of the programs that we had. And then some of them had incentives, ranging from monetary incentives of paying $50 to $100 to each student to complete the program, to others that had a scholarship for a quality student that had been recommended by the faculty. Let's look at a little bit at the outcomes that we were able to compile from this last year. We know that the completion rates were pretty high. 79% of the students that started in the high school bridge programs completed, and 85% of those in the developmental education program. So that's encouraging, especially as many of these students have other obligations during the summer, have to work, have other family obligations. And those were primarily the reasons that we saw when people didn't complete. As I said before, we had a great deal of difficulty with the testing and being able to analyze it, because not everybody was able to do the pre and post tests, and we had very small N's as a result of that. Okay, so we did see some positive effects in reading and math. and 83% of the developmental ed students enrolled in college in 2007, which is very positive. And now I just want to go quickly over a few recommendations that were given to us, both for the sites and for us. There were a few of the high school bridge programs last year that didn't take place on a college campus, and the University of Texas at Arlington, I think, rightly told us that that was something we should discourage, that they should all take place on a college campus. Transportation from the ISDs was important, and it didn't happen always because they didn't have a good relationship. More parent involvement, requiring a minimum number of hours of instruction. Some of the things that I already said about increased ISD participation and not using prepackaged curriculum and teaching to the test. Okay, almost done here. We did issue the RFP earlier this year. It went out much earlier, and they are already, as I said, recruiting. The UTA wanted us to expand the scores, but that's part of the legislation, and so the high school bridge program will continue to have that. As I'll say in a minute, there is a different developmental ed program this year. The high school bridge programs also did have follow-up into the fall, and that's something that we looked at in terms of their effectiveness. And just moving along to some of the things that have more to do with evaluation, we did identify specific outcome goals in the RFP this year. We were much more explicit about what the evaluation was going to look like and what they're going to be evaluated on. We have identified the THEA for the developmental ed or intensive bridge program this year exclusively, and requiring everybody to do that, and have developed a relationship with the NCES that runs the THEA to make sure that that will happen efficiently. And we've made sure that the tests that are being given, the surveys that are being given, are routine across the programs and are limited. And we're creating what we're calling a floating control group, so that we can do more analysis to see if these programs are really having the effect and it's not something else that's causing that effect. So this year in 2008, we have again 2 programs, the high school summer bridge, and then we're calling the program the intensive summer bridge is now from House Bill 2237 instead of from HB 1. It's a little bit different and will include some already in college students. So we're taking a little bit of a different strategy towards looking at that one. But it still has the same basic goal of helping students that are at risk and have been in developmental education to reduce their developmental education. On May 1st, we're having a program orientation with all the site program directors and their evaluators. And we've set up an online community for all the evaluators and the program directors to keep in much better communication with them and make sure that the expectations are clear. Okay, and finally, what we've already decided to do for this year and already putting into place is that all the programs have been asked to use a participant intake form that is uniform, so we'll have baseline data going into the program that's consistent. We have consistent testing with the TACS pre-post and the THEA pre-post in the 2 different programs. And we have set up a different data collection mechanism online through the coordinating board so that that data will be controlled. We're also asking them all to also use, in addition to the TSI test, the LASI, the Learning and Study Skills Inventory test, so we can see other things besides this content knowledge that might be an effect on these students and their ability to succeed in college in the future. And again, we're doing the site visits at all of the sites this year and looking more at the specific reasons why students don't make it through these programs, even though they elected to do it at the beginning. So, thank you.
Thank you. There's no action required on this agenda item, but are there any questions or comments?
I've answered all of them. Like you really got it under control.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, the lateness in the program, et cetera, for the first one. Given the lateness.
Yeah. And I think we'll have another report for you after this summer, probably much earlier, and I hope, and we'll let you know what happens this year.
We'll look forward to that.
Okay.
Are the programs tracking students after and seeing how they do in college and if they need developmental ed in those areas?
That's one of the reasons we wanted to keep the database very consistent. We are actually getting their identifier numbers for the students, and we will be able to track them. Our research and evaluation team will be able to track them into college. And through their
That's
program.
critical.
Yes.
It will make a huge dent. If these programs are effective, it'll make a huge dent on
the numbers of students needing developmental education.
Right, and that's what we're hoping to see. And Lynette?
I just have 2 comments, just quickly, so that you know what we're trying to do with PEA. They have some of these intensive summer programs for middle school and high school students, and Robin and staff have been meeting with their evaluators to at least kind of inform each other about what we're doing, as well as doing some tracking of their students from those programs into possibly our
These
programs, or into college, just to see how they do. So there is some work between us and TEA on tracking these students all the way through the process. The other thing that, because of the great work that Robin and her team are doing, and I'm just so grateful for these folks to be here, but while the evaluation was a little bit later than we anticipated, we were able to use some of that information in the RFP for this year. We anticipate doing more of that in the next years.
And the RFP goes out to all of the four-year universities, but also community colleges?
Yes.
And independents as well, or no?
No, it's just for the public institutions.
It's just for public?
Right.
Okay.
It's very heavily represented with 2-year institutions, although there are some 4-year institutions participating.
Right.
Okay. And as an aside, I don't believe that there is teaching to the test, but that's my personal opinion. If it's matching the curriculum, then it's teaching what it needs to be teaching. I mean, that's my personal opinion and defense of standardized tests. Just my personal slant on that. But thank you for your hard work.
I just want to say that what we were talking about is that these students, what I found was that they really needed a lot of study skills help. They weren't that low on the content. It seemed like they needed more of a push in socialization to education and studying than they needed the content.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 7D, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to guidelines for the 2008 Texas Higher Education Star Awards. Dr. Mary Smith, Director of Special Projects, and Lynette Heckman, Senior Director for College Readiness Initiatives, will review the changes on the guidelines. In the interest of time, if you all want to look, and if you'd like for them to go over them, that's perfectly fine, but if you'd rather just ask questions or comments, what is your pleasure? Do you have any questions?
I don't.
No? Hold it. No? Okay. If there are no questions, do you have a motion?
I move we adopt the guidelines.
Second. Okay, there's a motion by Dr. Phillips and a second by Ms. Mendoza. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your hard work. I didn't mean to slight you. We do appreciate what you're doing.
Fine.
And agenda item 7E is discussion of the Texas College Readiness Mandates, Responsibilities, and Deadlines document. I wish we had hours and hours and hours and hours to discuss this, because it's so important, and what we're doing and where we are is so critical. In the interest of time, again, do you all have any comments? I have comments and questions about every single one of them, but I don't want to take everybody's time.
I think it's really important. And
I
I
do
hate
too.
to wait, but maybe we should do it at the board meeting.
Well, could we take the time to do it at the board meeting? Because it really is important.
That's not a problem for us.
Is that all right?
We're here.
That's your judgment.
It's your,
Okay.
Yeah.
They are real interested. I mean, the rest of the members are interested.
They are, and perhaps that's a great suggestion, actually, because I'd like for every member of the board to hear this. And if the committee members would look over this between this afternoon and tomorrow morning and make some comments or pose some questions that you want to make for tomorrow, I would appreciate it, because this is really probably the heart of everything that we're doing. And I know that the former chair of this committee spent a whole lot of time making sure that we had, that we are on track with everything from the timeline to challenges and obstacles.
Ms. Bricker, if you and I could speak, if you have certain questions, so I can make sure we're prepared to answer those.
Okay, we'll do
It
that.
would help in the essence of the time tomorrow of the meeting, so maybe you and I can chat.
Well, not just me, but if anybody has any
Yeah.
suggestions to Dr. Laredo, I would appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay. Then we'll move to item 7F, updates on P16 initiatives. Again, this is just for our
review. There's no action required. Any questions that we want to ask on any of the initiatives? The P16 field specialists with P16 initiatives, African American Males Project, Closing the Gaps for Latina Students, College Access and Affordability Telethon, Transfer Success Summit, College Readiness Initiatives. Any comments or questions? Anyone you want to hear from?
You can either call me, I have cell phones, whatever's available,
Okay.
and you can also email me, and we'll have a response to any question you have by tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Okay, any updates? It says staff updates. Anything you'd like to add?
You had asked for something about the process we use for reviewing degree programs, so here's the handout.
Great.
One page, and you can
Yay.
read it or throw it away.
No, we'll read it. Okay. If there's no other business, that concludes today's agenda for the Committee on Participation and Success. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you for your hard work to all of the staff. And it is, 1:30? I can't see from there. 1:35? Two different times, one here, one here. 1:25, and we're adjourned.
And I think lunch is waiting for you.
Oh, and lunch is waiting for us.